Okay, so welcome. This is the fifth installment or session, not including the introduction, for Bosor B'Cholav, which means out of 16 shiurim at Bosor B'Cholav, we're number 5, so almost a third of the way through. So we are, Baruch Hashem, making progress. I hope everybody's doing Chazara. If 3-day Yom Tov, it's extra time to do Chazara, of course. In between bites of cheesecake, which actually it's very apropos subject, because all the dinim of the milchik suda and the fleishik suda we have in basically in the halachas that we're learning today. So that's really apropos of the time. We'll be able to put it right into practice. And let's get moving. Okay. So I wanted to mention this. I'm not sure. I don't think I brought it up before, but this is same from the Aruch HaShulchan. We have so many different gezetas over here. Let me speak first. So many different gezetas that it's sometimes hard to keep track on what's the explanation for these gezetas, and certain things seem to be very far-fetched. So there's a klal, and out of all the places you wouldn't really expect to see this necessarily in Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan, this is in Yeridei Sim Kuf Tesvav, L'gab B'Cholavakim, brings the whole story over there, very Ma'isa Meneira. See, it says, Be'emes kachum mekublani shekol gzeres chachamim labad taimam hanigla, that there's a tradition that all the rabbinic decrees, that in addition to the reason given, the revealed reason, the reason al pi nigla, yesh eid harbe taimim kamusim. There are many hidden reasons shaloi gilu esam that the sages did not reveal, and we'll actually see in today's shiur that we have a psak, which the Pashat Makar for it is a zayar, and we'll be speaking about this later on. Although in Nigla, sometimes it's difficult to find the reason, and you find other reasons that were not said b'feirish. So what we learned up until now, we spoke in Sim Pei Zayin about, in general, the difference. Let me just to change one thing over here. Excuse me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. You guys can see me?
Yes.
Okay. Fine. And I assume you see the PowerPoint as well. So we have in Sim Pei Zayin, we had all the Leisavashal Gdi, B'Chalei Vimei, what does it mean Sabashal, and what does it mean Gdi, and what does it mean B'Chalei Vimei in general. And then we had Siman Pei Ches, different types of separation between people leading Bosor and Cholav. And now we have in Siman Pei Tes, the waiting period from Bosor B'Cholav. So we'll start over here. So we have over here in the middle, we have a Gemara. So Gemara is Amar Rav Chisda. Ochel basar asr lachol gvina. That if a person eats meat, they're prohibited from eating cheese after the meat. But gvina mutar lachol basar. But if they had cheese, then they're allowed to eat meat afterwards. Now, are there any restrictions on that? So we'll soon see what restrictions we have on that. Fine. So Amalei Ravacha Bar Yosef L'Rav Chisda. Bosor shebein hashinayim. It's a pasuk. Bosor bein hashinayim is brought down in a pasuk. They had meat between their teeth. Mahu. What is its status when it's sitting over there in your teeth? Does it still have the status of meat? So as long as the meat is still within the teeth, so then we have to worry about its status as meat. And this is quoted as the Rambam as being the main difference between why it is, Rav Chisda said, that after meat you have to wait, and after cheese you don't need to wait, because you have the Bosor, when it's, even if it's stuck between your teeth, and it's much more likely that Bosor, because of its texture, is going to be stuck in your teeth, it still maintains the status of Bosor. We see the Pasuk, it speaks about it being between the teeth, stuck in the teeth, nevertheless still called Bosor. So then that's a problem. You're eating milk and meat together. Obviously, it's not derech bishul, it's in your mouth, but nevertheless, you have the meat in your mouth, and then you're eating the cheese afterwards, so you have to wait. What does it help to wait after 6 hours? So the Rambam explains that after 6 hours, it loses its status as meat. It's not considered to be meat anymore once it's wait. Okay, we didn't speak at all about 6 hours, but after a certain period of time, we'll leave it like that. Soon we'll see where the 6 hours comes from. After a certain period of time, it loses its status of meat. That's really the Rambam's explanation of this whole din, where he gets the whole idea of 6 hours from, that the digestive juices in the mouth, the saliva, whatever process is going on over there, causes it to lose its status as basar. Fine. Omar Avukva, Marukva. So Marukva said as follows: Anola hal milsa, that regarding this waiting period between meat and milk, Chala bar chamra lagabe abba. I am like Chala bar chamra. It's a famous Gemara phrase. Chala is vinegar, chamra is wine. So I am like vinegar, the son of wine, in comparison with my father. In other words, my father was like wine, and I'm on a much lower level than him. I'm just like vinegar. Why? The ilu abba, my father, ki hava achel bisra ha'idna, when he ate, if he would eat meat right now, lo hava achel gvina ad lo machar ad hashta, he wouldn't eat cheese until tomorrow at the same time. So if it was like right now, it's 7 o'clock Eastern time approximately, a little after 7. So he would wait 24 hours before having gvina. He would eat full 24 hours. But me, said Marukva, it's only at this same meal that I wouldn't eat cheese. At the same meal that I ate meat, I wouldn't eat cheese. But at another meal that I would eat. So that is the halacha, that you have to wait lusudos achrita. But the problem is the Gemara does not define for us what does it mean suda achrita. So that we have a number of opinions. So first we'll see on the left-hand side, this is our Teisvis. Teisvis, l'suda achrita chilna. So what does it mean, another suda? So we'll say it first outside. You'll see on the right over there that you see the Rif, and the Rambam Paskins like that, and it's speaking about a time period. And Teisvis learns that it's literally another meal. Now, what's the difference? According to Teisvis, we're not talking about waiting from one meal to another like people normally would eat 2 meals a day. That's the whole idea of Shal Shudas. So the Shlish is on Shabbos, because the normal eating during the weekday was 2 meals. And on Shabbos, you have a 3rd meal. So that's where it comes from. You have a poor person comes to the city, so you have to give him bread for 15 meals. Why? Because he eats 2 meals a day. And on Shabbos has to have a 3rd meal. So people would eat 1 meal in the morning, they would daven, then they would eat, and then would go to work. At night, they'd come home, and then they eat another meal. So that was the normal time period. And the Gemara speaks about how late does a Talmud Chacham wait after davening before eating, and a regular person before eating. In any case, it averages out to an idea of 6 hours, which we'll soon see in the Rif. But Taisa says we're not talking about necessarily 2 separate meals separated by time. Even right away, if they would take away the table and you make a bracha, say berachas hamazon, mutter, then it's okay. The Rabbanan did not differentiate and say it has to be this time from this meal to that meal. The din is it has to be another meal. So those days they would take away the whole table. We know from the whole idea of leaning on Pesach, they ate in a different fashion. Everybody was sitting around one big table. Everybody had their own table. So when you finish the meal, you take away the table. So and that's the sign that the meal's finished. There's nothing to eat anymore. But they not only took away the food, they took away the table. So Now there's nothing to eat. The meal is finished. You said Berchas Hamazon. It's gendik. It's finished. Now you want to eat again, so that's already called a Suda Achrita. It's Taka Suda Achrita. And to say that you need a time period too, says Taisus, Lei Plug Rabbanim. They said another meal. A lot of times Lei Plug, mostly Lei Plug is used to mean we don't differentiate them. When they made a Gzeira that were strict even cases where it might not apply. Over here, we're lenient in cases where it doesn't seem necessarily to apply. But he says the whole idea is it has to be a separate meal. And the idea, some explained that you can't eat meat and milk at the same meal. So make it a different meal, and then you have no problem. But the Rif brings down this din. You're not allowed to eat cheese after meat until you wait the proper time period, the proper amount. So the Rif learns that it's a time period. The Rambam says, Kishay Shois. Says the one on the bottom right, Shei Shois. Lashon Haram is Kishay Shois. That's why some learn that the 6th hour, you don't have to wait the entire 6th hour. The Kamat, all the poskim don't learn like that, but there is such a diuk that some make in the Rambam. I heard that in Lakewood they would because of the Seder Limud. So the way it worked out that they waited 5.5 hours. Makar with this diuk the Rambam Kishay Shois. In any case, they would say part of the hour is like the whole hour. In any case, see on the bottom left, so according to Taisus, all you need is Berchas Hamazon. You see a bencher over there, Silk Suda, you have to bench. And according to the Rambam and the Rif, they agreed that you have to have Suda Achrita. You're still not allowed to eat at the same meal, but you also have the time period. You have to wait 6 hours. The Ramaz, we'll soon see inside, brings down Minhag Ashkenaz was to wait 1 hour. And that's after eating meat. So today, that's not the minhag. The universal minhag is to wait 6 hours. But you look at Shulchan Aruch, we'll soon see inside that Machlekes Mechaber Ramah, how long you have to wait afterwards. So really, the Ramah brings down Das Atesis, that you don't have a time period, a set time period at all. But the minhag was to wait 1 hour. But you still need to have siluk suda, that you have to have a bracha achrena. So this is the makar. Now, when you look in the Gemara, I'll mention it now. We'll have some more details later on. But when we have things which are din of the Gemara, they're always stricter than things which are later on from Rishonim, from Achreinim, even though it's a minig Yisrael Teiri, and sometimes that the minig that ever brings many of the sichas, and we see in Ma'aseh B'chol Yom, people are more strict about a custom sometimes than even something that says beferish in the Gemara. But in general, in halacha, things which are din of the Gemara, it's one of the reasons it's so important to learn things from the source. Something it has a special strength. So we see this idea, sudos achrita, the idea of bracha achrena, is no matter how long you waited, nevertheless you still have to make. You still have to make a bracha achrena. That's b'pashtus. That's midin the Gemara. Now the Gemara, I'll just mention now. We'll have protim later. But the Gemara also mentions washing your hands. In fact, one of the major sugyas in Shas speak about Natilas Yadayim is right over here, because it speaks about washing the hands. It's going to be more in Sif Beis. Sif Aleph is first having meat, then having dairy. Sif Beis is going to be first having dairy and then having meat. And then Sif Gimel is Tavshil Shel Bosor and Tavshil Shel Cholav, but it's not mamish the milk and the meat itself. It's something which was cooked together with it. But we'll go last say the idea of washing in between. We'll see more discussed in Sif Beis, but some cases it's mentioned over here also, and that's Medina de Gemara. You have to make sure that your hands are clean, because obviously, if you're going to eat one right after the other, and you're going to still have food on your hands, so that's going to be a problem. You're going to pick up the milchiks, and your hands are still fleshik. So even though to suda achrina, and according to Taisus, you can eat right away milchiks. But if you have meat on your hands are still greasy from the fleshik meal you just finished over there, it's a problem. You have to wash your hands. So too, the Gemara mentions kinuach v'adacha, eating something parv, cleaning out the remnants in your mouth by eating something parv, and adacha, drinking something. And we'll discuss the pratim about that later. But the Gemara doesn't discuss the time period at all. According to the Rif and the Rambam, that's what the Gemara means when it says l'suda achrita. But it's not beferish in Gemara as we see. It's a machlekes Shainim, and it also comes out in a machlekes Shulchan Aruch. Questions so far? Further. Okay, so now we'll learn over here some Mechaber Ramah. So Mechaber starts off Ochel Bosor. This is Sif Aleph. Some Petes Ochel Bosor Afilu Shel Chai Ba'eif. Even if it's only Bosor Midrabanan, a Chaya like deer or Eif, chicken or something. LaYechel Gvina Achrab Ad Sheyisha Sheishois. You're not allowed to eat cheese afterwards until you wait for 6 hours. And this is the Mechaber passing like the Rambam. And in addition, even if you did wait the proper period of time, you waited 6 hours. If there's meat left between your teeth, and you still have to take it out. So although you don't have to wait another 6 hours, but you do have to take it out. And if a person chewed up meat to give to a child, this was the original food processor. Before they had all the mashed up baby food, people would, the food processor was called mommy, and she would chew up the food for the baby that wasn't able to chew. And say she would take meat, and it's already warmed up too for the baby. The baby is not makpid. The shaila is now the mother that chewed up the meat. Does she now have to wait? Does she have to worry about basa ben shinayim, but stuck between her teeth? She didn't swallow anything. She didn't really eat anything. She just put it in her mouth and spit it out. Nevertheless, you still have to wait because we have this issue of the meat being stuck between the teeth. And the Rambam is concerned for that, and therefore you have to wait.
Is Taisvus concerned for basa ben shinayim also?
We'll soon see the reasons for the reasons for waiting. We'll soon see from the Rishonim. Maybe we'll start right now on that. Okay, let's take the basic din, and we didn't yet discuss the reasons why you have to wait for 6 hours. We have the source. Just interesting. This is a Maimar Muskar. It's not really a Maimar Muskar. It's an important thing to know. But the Alter Rebbe Paskins, you have to know halacha b'time. You have to know the reason behind the halacha. What does it mean, the reason behind the halacha? Part of it is the source of halacha. So if you know why is it you have to wait for cheese after you eat meat? Because Rav Chisda says you have to wait till Sudos Achrita, till you have to wait to know the Suda. So that's the time. The reason is because it says in the Gemara you can't have at the same meal. Okay? But what's the reason? What's the reason for that? And especially since we see that there's a waiting period of Chisda said after Bosor, but not after Gvina. We'll soon see in Siv Beis that it's a lav dafke, and especially hard cheese. We'll have that discussion soon. But what's the reason for that? What's the reason behind it? So that's another type of reason. In any case, let's just get straight first what we have up to this point, the basic definition of waiting. So Mechaber passing like the Rambam that you have to wait 6 hours. V'yesh Eimrim, says the Ramah. We skipped a bit of the Ramah. We'll come back to that line. V'yesh Eimrim dein tzrichen lahamtin sheishois. There's another opinion that says you don't have to wait 6 hours. Rak miyad im stilu kaberach berchas hamazon. That right away, as soon as you stop eating and you benched, you said berchas hamazon. So then you don't have to have any time period. But mutar de kinuach v'hadacha. You still have to clean out your mouth. So that's the kinuach v'hadacha. We'll talk about the hands later on, but you need kinuach v'hadacha, and you see that from the Gemara. And who's the one that says all you need is to bench the Taisvus? You see over here. So not always, we've discussed before, I believe, that not always are these parentheses within the Ramah accurate, but most of the time they are, and certainly Taisvus says that, and it brings down all the Baalei Taisvus, the Mordechai, Agas, Ashri, Maimonides, and so on. All the Baalei Taisvus bring this down. So that's the basic machlekes we learned before in the Gemara. But now the Ramah throws in something new. That the general custom in our countries, that you wait after eating meat for 1 hour. Okay, and afterwards you eat cheese after you wait for an hour. But you still have to make, you have to bench after you eat the meat, because even according to Taisus, you don't have to wait. So the Iker is passing like Taisus, that you don't really have to wait. So then obviously you still need, you need to make a bracha achreina. But he's putting in this idea of 1 hour. Once you benched, then you can, it's considered to be a separate meal. And according to the lenient opinion, which is the opinion of Taisus, so then you have no problem after you made berachas hamazon. But without benching, it doesn't help that you waited an hour. In other words, it's not a machlekes whether you have to wait 6 hours, you have to wait 1 hour. The truth is, even according to the Rambam, you have to wait 6 hours. Nevertheless, you still have to do berachas hamazon. So it's obvious even for the 1 hour, also you need to say berachas hamazon. Okay, we'll leave this last phrase for the Ramah a little bit. Let's just talk about this for a moment. So the Mefarshim wonder, where did the Ramah get this sha'achas from? Where did it come from? Okay, you got it from the minig. But where did this minig come from? Does this minig have a source, or just people they decide not to rush into it, so they would wait an hour? Where does it come from? You have a crazy placy, Rabbi Yonasan Eibschitz. So he brings down Mordechai, it speaks over there about digestion, and he says that there's tchilas equal and safe equal. That's when the digestion starts, the beginning of digestion, and then the end of digestion. So the end of digestion is at 6 hours. But the beginning of a digestion is an hour. Just to make such an argument brings down a Magen Avram. That indicates that. Shame. But that's not generally accepted in Poskim. Out of all places, you look at the Bir Agra, if you have your Shulchan Aruch in front of you. So the Bir Agra, Vav, and Bir Agra, brings down, where did the Rama get this from? Bnuya al divra Zayir Pashut Mishpatim. It comes from the Zayir, this opinion. And here you have the quote from the Zayir, the crucial quote from the Zayir, and the Zayir is going to follow us through to Sif base 2. The kol man da ochel hay michla kachada. That anyone that eats such food, speaking in that sugya over there about eating basar b'cholav together, so he eats this food together, either mamish ate it together, mamish basar b'cholav, oy b'shait tachada, or the literal translation, shait tachada means 1 hour, or b'sudos achada, or at the same suda. So we see a makkah for the idea shait tachada. Shait tachada, but pashtus is 1 hour. Yeah, but shait tachada v'riga chada. So the Rabbi used this phrase. In any case, shait tachada, there's a letter, we'll see later on, there's a letter in Chelach Chaf and Igris. It's in Shulchan Menachem over there by Bosor B'cholav, the Rebbe wrote to the Hamletzer, who was trying to find Miniga Elam is, well, that's really sub-base after Milchix to wait a half hour. In any case, this Shait Achada is the source for our minig. We'll talk about it soon as sub-base, that we wait after dairy for an hour, because the Zayir doesn't differentiate between meat and milk then meat. So the Shait Achada is learned according to this Pirush, meaning 1 hour, and that's the source for the minig Yisrael, at least that they took upon themselves this Pirush in the Zayir to wait 1 hour. So it ends up that if a person ate a fleishik meal, let's say a person, it was a Shabbos afternoon, and the person ate a fleishik meal, and then they sat around and they had dessert, and there was another dessert, and they said l'chaim, there's a fabrengen. They ate the Shabbos food, let's say washed, there's a fabrengen, and it was going on the whole Shabbos afternoon. It's a summer day, and they're fabrengen over there, and from the time they finished eating the fleishiks, it was already 6 hours. And they're eating the whole time, so it's they didn't bench yet. And somebody said, hey, it's 6 hours already. We're milchik, let's have ice cream for dessert. So you're allowed to have ice cream for dessert. No, what do you say? Hello, everybody there?
You have to bench. No, you have to bench.
You have to bench. You have to bench. Why?
And wash your mouth.
First of all, you have to bench. Let's take one. Why do you have to bench? Why do you have to bench?
Sila kasuda.
Yeah, you have to have masalik and birchas hamazon. Fine, you're not allowed to have it at the same meal. Now the shaila is, do you need to wash your hands? Do you need kinuach vadacha? And there's another issue too. When do you count the 6 hours from? Maybe you should count the 6 hours from Berchos Hamazon. So the emes is, there are opinions like that say that the 6 hours, the time period, the 6 hours, or in the Ramah is talking about Amtana Shah, but the same klal applies. He's talking about he's waiting an hour instead of the Machaber 6 hours. And today's minhag is 6 hours, but the same principle applies. That we wait the waiting period. In the Ramah's case, it's an hour that we need to wait. But according to that, when do you count the hour from? Do you count the hour from the time you stopped eating the meat, or does the waiting period start from the time you benched? So that's the last phrase over here that's highlighted in the Ramah. There's no difference if you waited the hour before Berchos Hamazon or afterwards. And so too the 6 hours over here. After you did Berchos Hamazon and you did Siluk, so then you don't need to wait another 6 hours from then before you can have the ice cream. That's the psak of the Ramah. There are achreinim that disagree, but l'maisa, this is what we count on. And as we'll discuss soon, we'll review the Seder Achila for Shavuos in the morning, but we wait an hour after dairy before having meat, unless it's hard cheese, which we'll discuss in Sif Beis. But when does that hour start? From the time you stopped eating the dairy. You don't have to wait an hour after benching. This is a commonly asked question. You see an explicit psak from the Ramah, and although there's machlekes, halacha l'maisa, the hour starts after you ate. In the case that Ramah is talking about, it's waiting an hour after eating meat, because he's paskening according to the minhag that existed at that time.
What's
That's
the
in
logic
the whole linging of benching is only the das hatesvis. So you're putting together two shittas together. If you're saying you have to wait side of the hour plus an hour after benching.
Well, the shaila suda achrita, from there are two ways of learning. There are those that learn that the Machaber is being machmer to both shittas, but the Rambam himself also wants you to bench. And the reason of Pashat that Suda Achrita doesn't mean only time. It means also time. From the morning Suda to the night Suda, there was a time period in between. They also benched. That also makes it a Suda Achrita. It's not just the time. Yeah, there are opinions that hold not like that, but the Rav Paskim hold like that. Now Allah Chalamais, it's like that. And if you want to say that it's called be machmer to both opinions, or you want to say that it's even the opinion that says time also holds, that's part of the definition of Suda Achrita. There are two elements that enter into the picture. Okay. So now, there's a mashal that says if you find if you have people, excuse me, they have the Ramah first at the end, and the Ramah concludes over there. The Ramah didn't even bring any minhag Ashkenaz to wait 6 hours. Up till now, he brought first Yesh Eimrim. The Yesh Eimrim, you don't have to wait at all, you just have to bench. Then he brought the minhag Poshet, that you wait an hour. And then Yesh Medaktim l'Sheishois Achar Achilas Basar L'Gevina became Nochan Masis. He says that's the proper thing to do, and the Shach and the Taz both bring this down. The Marshal says you don't have to be Meicha, because the people that don't wait 6 hours have who to rely on. Or call me Sheish Bereich Teira Tzorach L'Hakman Al Sheishois. Anybody has Reach Teira, so the person says I want to have Reich Teira and I won't wait 6 hours. But today it's already beyond that. All the Paskim write that it's a universal, almost universal minhag to wait 6 hours. There are certain communities. So in Holland, there were communities that used to wait 1 hour. You had the German, the Ekes used to wait 3 hours. The different minhagim in different communities. And there are still some people that wait less. So if a person belongs to one of those communities, a person can't say, well, I feel Dutch today and I'm going to want some ice cream and only going to wait 1 hour. You can't do that. But if you are a member of one of those communities, so then there is that kula. In the chat, where the 3 hours come from, so we'll soon gonna find a possible mucker for that. But today, as I mentioned, today the universal minig is that everybody waits 6 hours. And yeah, Taz points out that according to Shulchan Aruch, Machaber says that you need both. You need, in addition to the 6 hours, it's not enough. You also have to have Siluk Sud. You have to have a bracha achrein. The Shach adds, common question. You just mentioned the Birchas Hamazon, but let's say the person ate meat and they didn't have it in the middle of the Suda. And no Birchas Hamazon. So bracha achreina. You have to make a bracha achrein. It's the same thing. The Siluk Suda doesn't have to be dafka for a Suda. If you're just having a shahakal, person had a piece of meat and they just made a shahakal on it, so you have to burn a fashes in order to, although the Gemara says Suda Achrita, but the idea is that there has to be a separation that can't be eaten together. Now, we see over here from this Ramah, because the Ramah said the minig is to wait an hour and then eat gvina. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. Over here, the Ramah said, when you don't wait at all, you need kinuach v'adacha. The Taz wants to learn that the same thing would apply after an hour. Okay, the Ramah does not speak. Again, there's 3 different time periods brought down by the Ramah. The Yesh Eimrim, the first opinion brought in the Ramah, the opinion of Taisus, you don't need to wait at all, you make a bracha. The Minik HaPashut is that you wait an hour. Then the Yesh Medaktikim is you wait 6 hours. The Ramah said by the Yesh Eimrim, by the first opinion, that if you didn't wait at all, you still need Knuach V'adacha. So you have to eat something parv and you have to drink something parv. And that's a discussion, the Gemara, Beis Hill, Beis Shammai, and the Gemara concludes that they both agreed with each other that you need both Kinuach and Hadach. Fine. The Ramah doesn't say it by waiting an hour, but the foundation of that Minig HaPashut is Das HaTesis. So do you also need Kinuach V'adacha after the hour? Now, the Mechaber doesn't mention anything about Kinuach V'adacha after 6 hours. After 6 hours, we assume that the mouth has itself cleared itself out. There's always an exchange of saliva and so on. So after 6 hours, we're not worried anymore about Kinuach V'adacha. If it's right away, we're worried about Kinuach V'adacha. What is with the 1 hour waiting period? That is a machlekes Shach and Taz. What would the Ramah hold in such a case? And what's the halacha? So the Taz says that you also need Kinuach V'adacha. Then the Shach says no. The only time you need Kinuach V'adacha is if there's no waiting period at all. But if there was an hour waiting period, said the Shach, late Tzorach Las, it's Kinuach V'adacha. You don't need Kinuach V'adacha. And I think maybe we should have learned the Siv base before Sif Aleph, because that's the more common case, and especially we're already tonight by Shleish Simei Agbala before Shavuos, so that's on everybody's mind. But that is a psak. We'll see from the Rebbe on this Shach that the Rebbe paskins like the Shach Lagabe Cholov. When we pass this, we see that the Rebbe quotes a Prima Godim on the Shach, and the Prima Godim is talking about this case of Cholov after Bosor, not Bosor after Cholov, like we're doing on Shavuos. In any case, Lamaisa, the Rebbe says that after an hour, that does the job of Kinuach V'adacha. So in other words, the Ramah who put Mutar al Yedei Kinuach V'adacha only by the first case, that you don't wait at all, is Bedafka. And does not agree with the Taz. We pass over here like the Shach, that if you don't wait at all, then you need Kinuach V'adacha. But if you wait an hour, then you don't need Kinuach V'adacha. Questions? Okay, so to summarize, you have Machlekes Mechaber Ramah. Mechaber says 6 hours and 3 days in Ramah. Either not to wait at all, just to make a bracha achreina, to bench. Minig HaPashut to wait an hour, and Yesh Medaktim to wait 6 hours. But as we mentioned today, the Minig HaPashut is not 1 hour. Today, the Minig HaPashut, even among the Bnei Ashkenaz, is to wait for 6 hours. Fine. So in the contrast here, he brings down this machlekes shach and taz, and he brings down b'makom tzeirich nitin lahakel. This is on page 37 in the Kuntres. Shlei tzarich little yodel kanechol adechas pif. Mentions over here also washing the hands, and it's curious that somehow this has escaped. There's a dinner de Gemara. Why people are not makbid on it, we'll soon see in a Pri Chodesh, perhaps a reason for it, but the Shach is machmer, then one has to be careful about one's hands. Yeah. So after 1 hour, B'nocham Matzerich, he paskins. So you look over here, if you have the Kunshitz in front of you, can't pass Rebbe Achreinim, and we'll see later on that Rebbe wrote this about paskin about waiting an hour is sufficient without kinuch vadacha, but you do have to make sure there's no food stuck in your mouth over there. There shouldn't be food mamash which is stuck. Okay, so you have a Pri Chodesh. Alter Rebbe frequently quotes the Pri Chodesh. The Pri Megadim frequently quotes the Pri Chodesh. Gdele Paske Sfard, and the Pri Chodesh says that the time between Suda Shachris and Sudas Arvis in the winter is much shorter because the days are shorter. If you have a Shulchan Aruch in front of you, so you have over here, it's quoted by the Gillian Marsha Gimel. So if you have this print of the with the Torah and Shulchan Aruch together, so the Gillian Marsha Gimel says Ratzulem Mesudel Lesudav Afshe B'Cheiref Ein Bein Sudas Toraim Lesudas Arvis Kiim Dalet Shois, that in the winter, from the morning Suda to the evening Suda, there's only 4 hours in between because the days are so short. It brings from the Pri Chodesh, and it's interesting. Shaila is maybe you can count part of it depends how far north you go, how short the winter days are. We'll see later on when see soon actually when the Reb Zalman Shimon Dvorkin came to Razash, so has a number of psakim that he was the Rav Lubavitch, for those that don't know, the Rav in 770, and he wrote over there regarding being mekel for children that he says, since anyway there are opinions, which is this opinion of Pri Chodesh, that says that you go by Shoas Maniyes. Pri Megadim writes clearly it's not Shoas Maniyes. He brings down this shita that says it's 60 hour, an hour means 60 minutes, but there is that opinion of the Pri Chodesh that says you go after Shoas Maniyes, so therefore in the winter each hour is shorter than 60 minutes, so therefore it could come down to 4 hours. And Reb Zalman Shimon wrote 3 or 4 hours. I guess in the north of Russia it was not only 4 hours, you could have 3 hours would be the equivalent. In any case, it's dark at 3 o'clock, so then that's 3 hours. It's half the day, so that's where you get your 6 hours gets condensed in the winter down to 3 hours. So he writes over there, Reb Zalman Shimon writes 3 or 4 hours. So perhaps that's where the minute came from the 3 hours. I didn't really see that written anywhere, but it's just staber. You see over here in the Gillian Marsha brings down Pri Chodesh saying 4 hours. I mean, the crazy place, he brings down this idea of Pri Chodesh, and he says to him, it doesn't make any sense. And then it's going to be the summer, you're going to have to wait longer than 6 hours. So in general, we say that these hours are 60-minute hours. But when you have a child, a chelek, cases where you have other reasons to be lenient, so then we can bring down this shita. Questions? Okay, we mentioned the idea of a chela. So the Piskei Tshuva brings down a Chassam Sefer, and you have actually in both in Bar Heitev and Piskei Tshuva, you have different versions of it. So that's why sometimes you'll see both in Bar Heitev and Piskei Tshuva, you'll see sometimes brackets, parentheses. So Chassam Sefer was not brought down at all in the early Piskei Tshuva on Shulchan Aruch. I think we discussed in our introduction. Piskei Tshuva brings down Shailos and Tshuvas. I'll say there Shulchan Aruch, but the Chassam Sefer was only put in a later printing. And in any case, he says over there it's Piskei Tshuva Gimel, and quotes this machlekes about Shos Manias. Then he said, Mecham Sefer says that you have a chayla that needs for his health, for his refuah, needs to drink milk. Afilu rak chayla k'tzas, even if he's just a little bit sick, he doesn't need to be so sick. So then he doesn't need to wait more than an hour, and he just has to make a bracha achrein on the meat. And then for a chayla, you could be mekel. The days that Ramah, they were lechatchila eating like that. So some sefer paskans for a chayla that you're allowed to, even a chayla k'tzas, you're allowed just to wait for 1 hour. Okay, so this is the summary of what we learned up until now. Shulchan Aruch. You need both the time. You see these little logos over here, little pictures help you remember. 6 hours plus Berachas Hamazon. According to Ramah, the minig is to wait 1 hour. That was the minig that Ramah quotes. Shach and Taz says you can't tzarech linig. You have to do like the Machaber says. But a chayla has to also make a bracha achrein or Berachas Hamazon, and he only has to wait 1 hour. That's Chassam Sefer that we just quoted. And regarding the Shah Achas, then we had the Machlek Shach and Taz that we mentioned before. This is just the review that you need Kinuch Avadach according to the Taz, but the Shach says you don't need it. Yes.
The
Question.
cotton also just 1 hour?
No, Cotton, I'll bring down over here. Maybe I'll skip ahead here. I'll come back to it later. Let's just skip ahead. Where do I have it here? Excuse me 1 moment. Let me just find the right slides, and I'll put this straight on the screen. Just 1 second. Get to practice our Zoom flexibility here. Okay, so this is Hamtana ben Bosor l'chol l'ktanim. This is a Kavetz Razash. I'm just giving you Zalman Shimon's opinion. I mean, there are many, many opinions. This is spoken about by all the poskim. There's a Ben Ish Chai says it goes by age. And the 1-year-old, you wait 1 hour. 2 years old, 2 years. Then by the time they're 6, you should be waiting over there 6 hours. Anyway, all different sorts of opinions. Certainly, you can be more mekel for those that say, yeah, you have to wait till the child B'chal understands until he's there 2 or 3. Other ones say the age of chinuch, and so on and so forth. The other ones say by 9, the age of 9, you should be already waiting for 6 hours. But this was the psak from Rav Zalman Shimon. Those that are very young and those that are very weak, I mean, very, very young. I mean, they don't have teeth yet. You don't have to worry with Bosor ben Shnayim, yeah. In any case, they're very, very young. And so too, children whose weak constitution. You have a child, the child had fleishiks for supper, and then they want their bati. They want a bottle of milk. You say, no, you didn't wait 6 hours. You didn't wait 3 hours. You didn't wait an hour. Okay, so little babies are in a different category altogether, not barech havana at all. The Ikra Din Taisu says you could do lechatchila. Make them make a bracha acharena, not shaykh, yeah? In any case, those that are very young and those that are very weak, give them something else to eat first before you give the milchiks to clean out the mouth. And then an hour is sufficient. What does it mean, gedalim? Gimel. So, Rav Zalman Shimon was a very, very, very practical Rav. Extremely practical. So you're going to go by age over here. You go by the child. Does the child need, a child not need? You have a child who's 8 years old and it's up to a giver and it doesn't matter to him. And you have a child who's 12 and a half and come, you can get him to eat and the subject is always getting colds and who knows what. Or he can't be savelit. He needs the milk. He can't take it. So im yia kavid bedover. If it's difficult for them, a kol apachas gimel adal choice. At least 3 or 4 hours. Sheyesh days shekiven shebecherev sheyem koter hum yisuldu l'suda. So since there are opinions that say that in the winter, when the day is short, from one meal to another is a shorter period of time. We don't paskin like this. they're supposed to be lenient. In any case, he holds that you can be lenient for children. And so this was his psak. So the when it comes down to it, it's not chinuch to be matzayer the children. Now, kinuch vadacha is something else. So that you have, if it's less than an hour, so everybody requires that. That's dinner de gemara. So if you can get them to do that, I have a little baby, once they're bati, it's probably not shaykh. But once they are a little bit older, you can give them something else first. First have this, and then you can have your milk when they're very, very young, or there's underage of chinuch. There's some judgment has to be used over here. But one thing, it's very important that even though we don't paskin like Taisvis, nobody does like that. Even the minig of the Ramah, nobody does like waiting an hour. You can find a few people in the world that are doing that. But it's important to know what's ikra din, what goes beyond that, and what's a mitzad the minig of waiting 6 hours to be mitzayah the children, not mechuyev, is one thing, but to make it suda achrita, that's something at dinner de gemara. So you try at least to have that, and that's why I mentioned over kinuch vadacha b'peh.
The pile, this is very uncommon, what he's saying. Does people do this nowadays ever?
About what? Do what?
For children that are just under bar mitzvah to just wait such a short time?
It says im yeh kever b'davar. It's only if they're having difficulty.
I'm saying it's very rare, no?
It depends, it depends which family. There's plenty of families where it's not so rare. It depends on the children. You have children that are getting sick all the time. You have children that you can't hardly get them to eat. Children with allergies, it depends on the situation. You can't make a cloud. It's not a statistical thing, it's a metziistic thing. Okay. Fine.
What's the gather of Ketanim B'Yoser? When do you decide that the Bari Havana to start waiting?
Yeah, Bari Havana is Kishmei Kain Hu once they're able to understand. Yeah, once they're able to understand something. Okay, let me again by them. Now, very important, the reasons, and it's important to understand, first of all, for understanding the din of Sif Aleph, of why we wait after Bosor. And it's also going to be the Yesod for helping us understand Sif Base about waiting after dairy, especially what's the story with the hard cheese. So, what's the reason? Why is it you have to wait for 6 hours? And that is basically a machlekes Rashi in the Rambam. The Rambam says, Bosor ben Shinayim, and that we saw before, quoted in the Gemara. The Rambam holds, it's like it's digested already. The enzymes and saliva break down the Bosor, so it's not considered Bosor anymore. So you wait 6 hours, even though it might be stuck in your teeth, it doesn't have the status of Bosor anymore. If you find it there, you're going to have to take it out. Well, we skipped that part of the Ramah, we'll do it soon. Okay, but the Rashi says that Bosor, it's because of the taste of the Bosor. Bosor makes a shuman, umeshach tam, ad shei shois achar achilos. So that's the vart, meshach tam. And there's a whole discussion at Diuk in the Rashi. Rashi also mentions Dovuk B'Peh. But the Ikir, the way the Achreim learned that it's Meshach Tam, and in Poshta Werter, that after you eat a fleshig meal, a person normally is more full than after having a dairy meal. And the reason is it's a heavier sort of food, and it takes longer to digest, and it's Meshach Tam. The Tam remains in the system, and as your body is digesting it, so therefore the tam is still existing in your system, and that takes 6 hours until that goes through the system. So what's the difference between these two reasons? There's very practical nafkaminas, 2 or 3 nafkaminas which are brought in poskim for the difference. First of all, okay, so after 6 hours, there's a debate about this diuk, but we'll learn it like this, as it's printed over here. That according to the Rambam, after 6 hours, it's not considered to be Bosor anymore. Does Rashi agree with that, or Rashi disagree with that? Don't say Rashi disagrees with that whole idea. And he says that the whole problem is being meshach tam. And he holds, at least according to one way of understanding Rashi, that even after 6 hours, it's still considered to be Bosor. How does he learn the Gemara and Bosor ben Ishnaim is a different discussion. But there is an opinion that holds that according to Rashi, that after 6 hours, it's considered to be meat. So now what happens? A person found meat stuck in their teeth, and then, okay, they have to remove it. But they said, Ashod the geld, and they took the Bosor, ben Shinayim, and they ate it. So now what? So according to the Rambam, you have to wait 6 hours. They ate Bosor ben Shinayim. No, you have to wait 6 hours? What do you say?
No, because it's me'ukal.
It's mokal. So now you didn't need any Bosor. And according to this way of understanding Rashi, you have to wait 6 hours? According to Rambam, you don't. But according to this understanding of Rashi, you do. Tzorach lamtim. Because the problem is meshach tam, and now this thing is still considered Bosor, and now you ate it to be meshach tam, you're going to have to wait 6 hours. Now, what's the din of the lady that chewed up the food for her baby? What's the din? A person just chewed the Bosor in order to feed it to the baby, to feed it to the child, and it's not even being swallowed. So it doesn't, according to the Rambam, you have to worry about Ishnaim, yeah? When you chew it, you have to worry about it being Ben Ishnaim for 6 hours. But what about according to Rashi? When is it Meshach Tam? Just when you chew it, or you have to swallow it? It's talking about the digestion. So it's not going to get digested if you just chew it up and spit it out. So it's not going into the digestive system. It's not Meshach Tam, and therefore it's Tzorach La'amtin. It's another nafkamina the Pos can bring. What happens if a person just had something with schmaltz in it, and there was no mamashas of Bosor? So what happens then? A person had chicken broth. Okay, we don't want to go into the shaila whether that's a tafshel shel Bosor or not, but let's say the poskim write down the shuman shel Bosor has the din of Bosor. So a person took beef and melted some fat, and ate that, ate some French fries with it, whatever the case is, and mamish ate shuman shel Bosor. So what's the story? So do you have Bosor ben Ishnaim? No, it was all melted and it was liquefied, so then you wouldn't need to wait. Okay, but as far as the tam, yeah, the main tam is coming from the fat. It's another nafkamina that's mentioned in the paskin between these two reasons. Okay, so the Shulchan Aruch paskins like both lahachmir. So here we see in Sif Aleph, Ochel Bosor afil l'chai va'oif lo yechol gvin achrav vad yishei shois. Yeah. And im yesh Bosor ben Shinayim tzorach lastir. That after the 6 hours, you still got to take it out. You have to take it out of your mouth. You're not allowed to eat it. But so we're worried that the person is going to eat it, and then it's going to be meshach tam starting from that time. And we also paskin. So we have to take it out of your teeth, according to the Rashi, because we're afraid the person is going to eat it. Then you're going to have to wait another 6 hours. And we're also concerned about the opinion of the Rambam, who was the tzarech la'amtim in the case where you just chewed it. And if you found meat between your teeth and you took it out, says the Ramah, so you have to do adacha, because there was a remnant over there, and according to the second way of understanding, that it still had the status of Bosor, so you took it out of your mouth, and therefore you still have to clean it. Obviously, the woman that was leis latinik, for sure she's going to have to do, she's going to have to clean out her mouth before she eats milchik. So even though according to Rashi, she's not going to need to wait, but she certainly has to do. So Lamaisa, the woman that's leis latinuk, is going to have to wait for 6 hours because of the opinion of the Rambam. You're going to take dental floss and you're going to brush your teeth and so on and so forth. So it's another case of leiplug. We don't differentiate. And minig Yisrael kadeshim shafilim rak loas shuman yesh la'amtim sheishois. So that was the case I brought you. That let's say the person just the person didn't chew up mamish meat that it could be stuck benishinayim. The person just what's an example? A person took schmaltz and put it on a piece of matzah and fed it to baby achnu shel Pesach. Fine. People that eat like that. They took the schmaltz. The schmaltz didn't have any mamashos of Bosor in it, and it chewed it up, and then gave it to the baby. So according to the Rambam, you don't have to worry about Bosor ben Shnaim. There's no Bosor there. According to Rashi, it's not Meshach Tam. So why should you have to wait? Pashas, you shouldn't have to wait. But the minig Yisrael is to wait anyway. People are going to get confused. What about te'ima? So te'ima, what about tasting the food? So tasting the food, when you say the word tasting, which you'll learn later on in Ilchas Tarubas, you have in Ilchas Tainias and Orach Chaim also, what does it mean to taste food? Taste food is only when you swallow it, or taste food is even if you don't swallow it. You just put it in your mouth and you spit it out. It's also called tasting. So this tasting, where it brings down, you see in the Kuntras over here, so he brings down that it was just tasted with your tongue, and then spit out. Yeah. So this is a dark tshuva sifkat yud, and if the person just tasted it on his tongue and didn't chew it, when miyad polit as a basa and right away spit it out, then you don't have to wait 6 hours. You still have to do kinuach, but you don't have to wait 6 hours. But otherwise, if it's being swallowed, to wait 6 hours. So it's not uncommon. The person is parv and they want to be parv, and it's out of Shabbos, and they tasted the chicken soup and they tasted some of it and say, oy vey, I did te'ima. What now? So Beikar Adin, a person should wait. Let's say a person is making food for another. We'll see this later on, the din of a shamish. If you're preparing food, what's with your hands then? See, sometimes a person they're preparing milchik for the baby, let's say, and they're preparing fleishik for the rest of the family, or they themselves are eating milchik and they're preparing fleishik for cooking for Shabbos, for Yom Tov, and then they get some fleishik on their finger and then they stick it in their mouth, just reflex, and then eats it. So if you spit it out, then you don't have to wait. But if you swallow it, pashtus, it's an issue. Okay. And the Shach points out that even if you found meat in your mouth, and according to Rashi, it still has the status of Bosor, according to this understanding, you don't have to wait 6 hours, or Shah, according to the Ramah. You only have to wait 6 hours after you eat the Bosor, not if you take it out of your mouth. So you'd have to take it out of your mouth, but you don't need to wait for 6 hours. Okay, it brings down in the Kuntras over here another issue, and so Chasam Sefer. What about a person that has cavities? A person has holes in their teeth, or even without cavities, there's spaces between the teeth where food is bound to get stuck there. Do you have to worry? Do you have to clean out your cavities first? So it's one thing, you just check, superficially to see if there's meat, there's Bosor ben Shnaim, but you have to make up the fundamental cleaning to make sure on what's with the holes in the cavities and so on. So it's a very important statement of Chasam Sefer, and it's used as a yesod for many other psakim. And he says that over there it's a closed place, and it becomes nimas for nifsal midei achila. It loses its status of food. It's like if a person, if you go to the dentist and let's say the person has a cavity and the person cleans out the cavity, so there's a reach leitev. There's bacteria. The bacteria that eats up the food causes it to spoil, so it becomes ma'upash. Doesn't have the status b'chal of food, and therefore he says that the person that has holes in their teeth doesn't really need to worry about it. And the emes is when it comes. So it's known in Beis Harav, Lagav Pesach, the Chametz also b'mashahu, that you have fillings, and you have a blia, for example. A person has a metal filling, so metal is balei tam. So why is it you're allowed to use the same teeth for basa and chalav? Can't use the same dishes for basa and chalav. So b'meila, when you're talking about your teeth, a davar chai ain't a balei. The teeth are considered to be alive, and they don't absorb taste. So you used it for hot pizza, and then you have to wait for the Eina ben Yemei. I never saw anywhere that was the reason for Marukva's father. So Agav, it does bring Kisvei Arizal. The Arizal was machmer to wait to wait until the next day. When the Morachel Yo came to the Rebbe, I think it's Tavshin Mem Hey, Dalet Mem Hey, so they had a whole discussion about this issue of the Arizal not eating milchiks and fleishiks on the same day, and different places, quoting Kisvei Arizal, where it's spoken about. I never saw anywhere that in order to be Aina Ben Yema Yatit. Never saw that anywhere. In any case, how is it that we're talking Mekel, especially comes Pesach, where L'chatchila machmer even on Eina Ben Yema, even if it's more than 24 hours. Don't worry, we didn't learn that yet. We'll be learning at the later Simonim. But in general, the contemporary poskim write that since it's ma'upash, so within a closed place, it's within your mouth, and it doesn't have the status of food, doesn't have the power to ask or anything. I mean, the others, they're right. But people don't put food that Yad Saled is by in their mouth. Which, again, what's the Shiur Yad Saled display is question. A person that burns the palate by eating a hot piece of pizza, Mastamba did put something Yad Saled display in their mouth. But anyway, that's one of that datum. How that works with the Dover Charif, not a question. But the idea that it became upash is used as you saw this psak from the Chassam Sefer. Questions?
Were you going to explain what it means according to Rashi that it's Meishech Tam? What's being Meishech Tam?
I think the explanation I gave before that it takes longer to digest. So that's what it means, that the taste is still in the system. And since the taste is still in the system, the tam is still there. The person did, I don't know, people ate supper. If you had a fleishka supper, you can still feel you ate a fleishka supper.
So is it mean Meishech like a pula nimshechas from the Bosor that's in his stomach, and then after 6 hours, the Bosor is not there, and therefore there's no more tam, or it's more of it's a satisfied feeling that's of the quantity that's in the.
You have different measurements. You have lagabe bracha achreina, for example. So the din is, a person forgot to make a bracha achreina, forgot to bench. So how long do you have? So those are measured by time period. But the Lashon HaGemara and Alter Rebbe Paschals like this, the halacha is once it's digested. Okay, shkeich. How do I know? I'm not a doctor. How am I supposed to know when it's digested? So the lagabe bracha achreina is when you're hungry again. That means it's digested. Okay. If you're thirsty again, then it means that the food has been digested. That's the way you measure. And that's why Chaim Noah has a whole discussion. It says a shulchan. What happens if you didn't fill up the first time? So, you're hungry even after you ate. So then you have to use a time period. It's not good enough to use that measurement of the Gemara. So that's as far as bracha achrein is concerned. Over here, it's how long it takes basically for the food to digest is measured differently according to the type of food. So since a person feels full, a person feels satisfied. The time a person feels different, I don't have the words for it, but the yodinish benafshe, that if they're eating fleishiks, person has a heavy meal and they feel that they ate fleishiks.
Because it almost sounds like the same as the Rambam. The only difference is the Rambam says that you have to be chayshish that Bosor is still being ashinayim, and Rashi says that the Bosor is still being Meishech Tam, but it's in your stomach.
No, because according to the Rambam, if you just chew it and spit it out, you still have to wait. According to Rashi, you don't. You don't feel any heaviness if you chewed up food. For carrot, you feel more hungry when you finished than when you started because you did all this work chewing up the food. But there's no meat in your system. Even if there's meat stuck between your teeth, it's not being digested within your digestive system that the person feels full. Okay, let me get weiter. Siv base. I'm going to start now. Siv base. Take a little while. Let's get to the main background over here, and then we'll take a break. But Siv Gimel is there's a lot of material here in the Kuntres on Siv Gimel, but I'd like to spend more time on Siv base because Lamaisa Tafshel Shel Bosor and Tafshel Shel Cholav, Halacha Lamaisa we treat it basically like Bosor and Cholav anyway. So there are many kulas that are brought in Shulchan Aruch, Agabe, something which is not Bosor or Cholav Mamish, and that's Sif Gimel. But Lamaisa we're normally Machmer anyway. So let's learn another piece of Gemara. And this Gemara, if anybody was learning learned the Shach in Sim Pei Zayin, the Shach quoted this Gemara. And when we learned it, I think I mentioned it briefly that we're going to come across it in Sim Pei Tes. It's going to be crucial. Over there, the Shach was discussing is Bosor Eif v'cholav midiraisa midirabon. That we had an opinion brought in the name of Teisvus that the Psak Halacha that Bosor Eif v'cholav is midiraisa. They try to bring a raya from this Gemara over here. Rayas to this way, that way. But anyway, right now we're talking about the separation. So Tana Agra. Agra is the name of Chacham. And he quoted a Braisa. So Tana Agra taught. Who's Agra? Chamua the Rabbi Abba. He was the father-in-law of Rabbi Abba. What did he say? He said a very important statement. All the Rishonim Achrein talk about. Eif ugvina necholin bapikeir. Sounds a little like popcorn, but doesn't mean popcorn. Apikeir no lashon hefker. Different girsois. You look in the Hagoyes Hatur, in the later prints over there, all different girsois for this word apikeir. In any case, lemaisa, it's from the lashon hefker. Hefker means that we don't care about it. What it means we don't care about it? In other words, things that we would normally care about, in this case, we don't care about. So that's just what the Baraisa said. So he taught the Baraisa, and he explained the Baraisa too. What does it mean by apikeir? What's the hefker? That you don't have to do natilas yadayim, and you don't have to do kinuach hapeh. You don't have to eat something parv. And the whole rest of this, a large part of this Amud over here is discussing B'Shamay, B'Shil, B'Kinuach, and Adacha is the main thing Kinuach, eating something parv, or the main thing Adacha is something parv. And then they conclude that both of them hold. You see the bottom line, Mama, or Choda, Mar, Choda, V'Lepligi, both B'Sham, B'Shil agree you need both Kinuach and Adacha. So it's, Agra only said Kinuach, but he means Kinuach v'Adacha. So what, and the Gemara tells a story. Make sure that this is being highlighted. And the Gemara says that what's nechol ba'apikerin, eifu gvina in bosor gvina loy. So that's the difference between eif and gvina and bosor and gvina. That we have a chumra by bosor, which is a kula by bosor eif. What's the kula? That it didn't require natilas yadayim, it didn't require kinuach hapeh when it comes to bosor eif. Now, when you look at the Braisa, it says eif ugvina. So it looks like first came the eif, and then came the gvina. The Rambam learns that in this case, it must be first the gvina and then the off. Because otherwise it wouldn't be enough. You can't, if it's first eif and then gvina, you can't have it b'apikerin. You can't eat it b'sasei hefker. So it must be talking about first gvina and then eif. And that's when we have a kula, lagabe basar eif. Lamaisa, we're going to be just as macham on eif, because according to the Ramah, we treat it the same with basar eif and basar behema in this case, when you had first the gvina. But according to the Rambam, this is the Shulchan Aruch Paskin, it's talking about first the person had gvina, and then they had off. So if a person had gvina, in this case, milchus, let's not get into the hard cheese issue over here. So a person had, what is this, leban? Yeah, leban, yogurt, whatever it is. And then the person had chicken. So according to Agra, you don't need natilas yadayim in between, and you don't need kinuach v'adach in between. But if you're having first that yogurt, and then you're having basar behema, so then you would need natilas yadayim, and then you would need kinuach. So as we see over here, if it's basar eif, mutar lecha basar eif acher gvina, leitzarech hamtanas mana pula masuyamas. Eating it behefker, the way he's learning that you can eat it right away, behefker means you don't even need to wait. If it would be first basar eif and then gvina, so then it's a different story. But according to the way the Rambam learns, you learn having first gvina and then eif. Nechol ba'afikerin means you don't have to do anything. You don't have to wait. The pula mesiyemes is that's no natilas yadayim, no kinuach, no adacha. Okay, but if it's basar behema, motalecha basar bakar acher gvina v'leit tzarich hamtana avul tzarich, you don't have to wait. There's no time period. mentioned here in the Gemara, but you need Natilas Yadayim, you need Knuach HaPeh. I don't recall. Let me. We're going to add Hadacha here also. Let's. So here we see Tanya B'Sham Eimer Makaneach Beis Hillel Eimer Madiach. Then a whole discussion which is better, is Kinuach better, is Hadacha better. Anyway, the Gemara concludes B'Sham Eimer Kinuach Hu Adam Madiach Beis Hillel Eimer Madiach Hu Adam Makaneach Mar Machod Lipli. Both of them agree. You need both Kinuach ve Hadachas. You need both. Okay, so these are the pools you need L'Tilas Yadayim. And obviously, you have to make sure that there's no milchiks left on your hand before you eat the bosor behema. And so too, you have to clean out your makinuch hapeh. And so too, you have to drink something parv. You have to eat something parv. You have to drink something parv. But according to Agra, if it's only bosor eif you're eating afterwards, so then you don't need to. There's no necessity. What's with the waiting period? So here in the Gemara, there's no waiting period. Even after Bosor, there was no waiting period. The Rambam and the Rif, they learned that the Suda Achrita means a waiting period, but it doesn't mention explicitly a waiting period. And certainly after Gvina, it doesn't, after Milchix, it doesn't mention a waiting period over here. But along comes the Zayar. So here's, they have the quote from the Zayar. Kol man da'achla ha'mechla this chaber kachoda, b'shayt kachoda, b'sudos kachoda, arboin yemis chaz yachul. So this is, what's the result? So it's all riches in the Zayar that for 40 days there appears a gedi that's wrapped up in klippus, and it comes to the person for 40 days and all sorts of things. If a person conceives a child over there, what's going to be the terrible things in the shama of a child? It's a bad news. Any of these things that the Zayar says, it's bringing down dinim koshim to the world. Okay, so Hepsik Suda, we saw mentioned earlier in the Gemara, and it just said it after Bosor before Cholov. The Sfara says the same meal would go the other way around, but Lepeil, the Zayah says it clearly, Sudas Chada, and also Shaita Chada. And Shaita Chada, the way we learn, there are those that learn that it's Navdafka an hour, it's a time period. The Rebbe in this letter to the Hamletzer also brings down that there are other ways to learn Shaita Chad. The Rebbe quotes different sources, different ways to learn it. But Pashtus, this is going to be the mucker for what we're going to see. This we learned already from the Zalmashim. So here we see the Shulchan Aruch. So let's just do inside what we learned, and then we'll take a break. So Ramachaber says this is a base, Achol Gvina. And we're not talking about Gvina Kosher. That's we have a picture of yogurt, whatever it is over here. Mutter Lechalach Rav Bosor Miyat. Machaber Paskins, there's no waiting period after Gvina, and you're allowed to have right away. However, that says in the Gemara, you have to inspect your hands, that there's no cheese which is stuck to your hands. So I'm going to go back to this Gemara over here. We didn't read it inside, but it's worth reading inside. This is your you might as well get a story, you got to break up the learning with a story. So this is a Talmudic story, the Gemara tells a story. It's not Stam, you have a Yankov story, this is a halachic story. So let's just go back over here. Again, Tana Agra said you can eat Eifa Gvina, Ba'Pekeirim, Ba'Hefker. Yeah. Rav Yitzchak Berei, the Rav Mesharshia, Ikla Lebei Rav Ashi. So Rav Yitzchak went to the house of Rav Ashi. Aisole Gvina, Achel. So they brought him Gvina to eat. He ate it. Aisole Bisra Achel. And then they brought him Bosor. And the Bosor was Bosor Behema. Volei Moshe Yodei. But he didn't wash his hands. So wait a second. Agra said there's no problem, Natilas Yodayim by Bosor Eif. But what's the Bosor Behema? He didn't wash his hands. So the Gemara is, Vatana Agra Chamud Rababa Eifa Gvina Nachon Ba'Pekeirim. That this, the cheese and chicken, Bosor Eif, you can eat Absazai Hefker without until Shadaim. Eifo Gvina in, Bosor Gvina lay. That's only if it's Bosor Eif, not with Bosor Gvina, Bosor Mamish. So they asked him, why are you not washing your hands? So Amar Lahu. So he said, Hani Mili Belelia. That's only at night, but you can't look at your hands. Avil be your mama, Chazina. But during the daytime, take a look at your hands and see if they're clean. What do I have to wash them for? Let's take a look at it. Take a look at your hands and see if they're clean. So that's why Rabbi Yitzchak did not wash his hands after the Gevina before he ate the Bosor, because it was during the daytime, and he looked at his hands, he saw they were clean, so he didn't have to wash his hands. Well, discussion of Mefarshim, what happened with the Kinuach, but that's the source of this Machaber. So when you eat Gevina, achar Bosor, miyad, you can eat the Bosor right away, according to the Machaber. You have to inspect your hands, that there shouldn't be any of the milchik stuck to it. And if it was nighttime, that you can't inspect them properly, then you have to wash them. And so too, you have to do kinuach v'adacha. And that's what the Gemara said. The Gemara was mekel when it came Bosor eif. Now, what is kinuach v'adacha? So Machaber explains, kinuach hu sheyilos pas, v'yakanech bepiv yofa. The kinuach is that you chew some bread. You don't just chew it and spit it out. The Mefarshim explained. Aside from hefzer reichlim, you should swallow it. So you chew up the bread to clean the remnants of the milchik that's in your mouth. But it doesn't have to be bread. So you can use whatever part of the thing you want. You can't use flour. I don't know who would chew flour, but anyway, flour or dates or vegetables. What's the matter with these things? Because they stick to your palate. And they don't clean properly. And then you do adacha. So I mentioned specifically over here water or wine. And then the Mechaber adds, that's in talking about Bosor Behema. We'll talk about Chai in a second. But if you're eating Bosor Eif after Gevina, ain't it tzarech lekinuach v'lei natila. You don't have to wash your hands. You don't have to do knuch. You don't have to do adacha because he's passing like agra. The pashtus, what's the difference? You would want to learn at first glance that the difference is behem is midiraisa, Bosor behem is midiraisa, and Bosor eif midirabban. So what's Chaya doing over there? The Rambam paskins that Chaya is midirabban. Rambam says we discussed this back in Sim Pei Zayin. The Rambam Milchos Mamrim, it looks like he holds that Bosor Chaya is midiraisa. Okay, Ksav Yateman doesn't have that. In any case, the Shulchan Aruch we pass that both Eif and Chaya midirabbanim, only Bosor Behema is midiraisa. So why is Chaya being put in the same category as Behema? So the Neisa Kalim Shulchan Aruch explain that we're talking about things being stuck in your mouth, and Chaya is more similar to Behema than it is to Eif. So it's not really because one's midiraisa, one's midirabbanim. Shaila is which is more likely to leave a reshim in the mouth. The Ramah is v'yesh machmir mafilo b'basar achar gvina, and then those that are machmar even with basar achar gvina. Okay, so we have over here Mordechai b'shem Maram. So this starts getting down to what's the minig and what's lamaisa and what's going to be with the cheesecake and what's going to be with the blintzes, and this way we'll make sure we don't lose anybody in the break, and so we'll take a short, take us 10-minute hafsaka. It's now, what time? It's 20 after, it's 8:20, so 8:30 with Mirza Hashem will pick up. Okay, I'll take the questions then. Zoom. Okay, fine. So we had a question from before. Where does Havineinu get their ruling? Page 39 with Chabad Blod Kinuach. Yeah, okay, we're going to talk about that now. And yes, there is a mistake. Very, very alert thinking over there on page 39, right underneath the box, Lasuke Shmaitasam, the first line that begins because of a Shulchan Aruch in the Havineini book on page 39. So the first line outside the box. The last words are El Yachalechel Es HaGvina Miyad. It should be Es HaBosor Miyad. Yeah. Handed that back to the very alert observation. Already handed that back to the powers that be. Okay, so now we're going to get on to the very applicable SIF base. So let's just back up a bit and review what we had until now. When we had in Sif Aleph, the waiting period after meat, so we had two reasons. We reasoned of the Rambam that meat gets stuck in your teeth, and the reason of Rashi that because of the strong taste, it stays in the system. If you would want to import those ideas into Sif base and waiting after Milchik, so Bosor bein hashinayim really doesn't work too well because cheese usually doesn't get stuck between your teeth. One could make an argument that that is relevant. And in fact, if we had time, we'd learn it inside, but you look at the Dark Mesha, I believe it's Sif base, it brings down from the Maram Rottenberg. Maram Rottenberg was the teacher of many of the Gedei Rishonim. And we consider him to be like the end of the Bali Tesis, maybe the Rosh. So the Rosh was a student of Maram Rottenberg. Maram Rottenberg was the one that was locked up in the tower that wouldn't accept to be ransomed for the high price. In any case, the Rosh ran away to Spain because he knew he was next on the list. The Mordechai was also a student of Maram. Sharadura, many Gedei Rishonim were students of his. And he writes that he once, after eating cheese, went to eat meat and he found some cheese stuck in his teeth. So the Maram was gazer on himself to wait after eating cheese. And Dark Mesha brings it down. So here you see in the Ramah, we're going to learn the Mechaber inside, but you see where it says Haggah, over here, the bottom three lines on the screen. There are those that are strict to wait with Bosor Acher Gvina. Mordechai b'Shem Maram. We have all of these dinim over there in Orach Chaim too, and there's very little in the Torah over here. Torah b'Yosef, it's all over there in Orach Chaim Kufayim Gimel. Similar discussion over there in Orach Chaim. In any case, so Mashal, others, so the one time the Maram got Gvina stuck in his teeth, so he made a gezerah for everybody. It says my screen sharing is paused. Do you not see the Mechaber? Everybody sees the Shulchan Aruch there?
Yes.
I see it.
See it? Okay. I have an error message on my screen. We'll just ignore that. So how seriously do we take this? So we see that the Dark Mesha quoted it. We see the Mordechai quoted it. So I guess something happens to you and me is one thing. Something happens to the Maram is another thing. And the Maram was somebody that was able to recognize that it wasn't just him, and it's something that he should teach his students, and it got passed down all the way down to have a chumrah to wait after Gvina, even though the Gemara says not like that, but to wait after Milchiks as well. Now he had cheese stuck between his teeth. Now one could learn that that was about Gvina Kasha. But the emes is, and the reason I'm going into this now, it's not just the story with the Maram. In order to understand the whole machlekas about what's hard cheese and where did this whole thing come from, so we need to understand this whole concept of 6-month aged cheese. That's called, when is it called Gvina Kasha? When it's 6 months old. What happens when it gets 6 months old? So the main thing that happens is it becomes more hard, that the moisture goes out of it and it becomes harder in texture. The taste also gets somewhat stronger, but the ikar is the texture. The shaila is, does texture really matter when it comes to cheese? No matter how hard the cheese is going to be, if you're going to be eating it, it's not going to get stuck in your teeth like Bosor. The very, very hard cheeses that you can't eat, that you have to grate the cheese, because you can't take a hard piece of cheese like that and put it in your mouth. So it would seem to make more sense. The other reason, besides being Meshach Tam, that the cheese also has a sharp taste. And we'll see this discussed in Shach and Taz, but the way people learn, they actually get it a bit backwards. People think the main thing is that, is it hard cheese? The Lashon Taka Gvina Kasha. The main thing is the texture. No, do you have to be machmer about the taste too? No, maybe yeah. Where in reality, it's the other way around. The Taz, as we'll see, makes a whole thing about the taste of the cheese and waiting because of the taste of the cheese. And we'll discuss in a moment how the cheese gets its taste. We spoke about the end of Sim Peizayin, about cheese making. But the ikar is the time. Do we have to worry that it's hard also 6 months also? So the Taz is not so excited about that chumrah. The main thing is the taste. Who says about the waiting because it's hard? No, okay, machmer for that too, but that's not the ikir. The shach comes along and says if it's aged for 6 months, then it's a gvina kosher. But he doesn't say that's the definition of gvina kosher. He's making a chumrah that even though it's 6 months and it might not have such a strong taste, nevertheless you still have to wait. So the reasons that we learned before in Sif Aleph, Lagab Bosor, and afterwards Chalav, apply to this din over here also. Maybe I get a bit ahead of myself. We have to learn Ala Seder, but don't see your screen. Okay, so I thought let's try this again. So I asked whether my share screen was working. Now it's working. See it now?
It
Yeah,
was working the whole time.
Okay, some people saw it, some people didn't see it. Okay, fine. So we took a break. So let's read through again the Mechaber. According to the Mechaber, there's no waiting whatsoever, regardless whether it's chicken or regular bosor. But you have to do, you have to check your hands. If it's night, you can't inspect them, you have to wash them. And you have to do kinuach v'adacha. What's the kinuach? Is you eat some bread or something else aside from kim chatam v'yarka. They don't clean your mouth well. And then you do the adacha. Shach points out, I think he puts it on the PowerPoint here, that although the Lashon Shulchan Aruch is first kinuach then adacha, and there are achreinim that say that it's bedafka that order. And the idea behind that is that when you first eat something powerful, let's say you eat bread, so then it cleans up all the residue which is in your mouth. And then you have the residue stuck to the pieces of bread in your mouth. So although you swallow the bread, but there's still bereklach, there's little pieces stuck in your mouth. So then you do adacha. And then when you drink that, it washes that down too. But the shach says the order is lav dafka. You could do first adacha, and then you can do the kinuach. You could do either way also. There are others that disagree and say that this lashon is dafka, yeah. And that's what Agra, Tana Agra, there is a Brisa said that you can eat Eifek Vina Babake. At Hefker, you don't need Kinoch, you don't need Tils Yadayim. Now, I should mention over here that although we see Medina de Gemara, you do need to wash in between, and we don't really see people being too careful about that. There's a Pri Chodesh who says that this whole din is talking about when people didn't eat with utensils. But if you eat with a fork, so then you don't need to do this. But Lamaisa, the others that disagree, the Shach brings down, we see your hands get dirty anyway. So he quotes the Lavush Paskins like that you should wash them anyway. Because, I mean, Lepayel, even though we eat with forks and knives and spoons, but nevertheless, we have napkins too, because somehow, how does it happen? But your hands get dirty. Lamaisa, your hands get dirty. We have in Sif Gimel certain kulas by Tavshir Shal Bosor. But when it comes to this Inyan, it says even worse, Tavshir Shal Bosor, Tavshir Shal Chalav, your hands get even dirtier than would just from picking up a piece of cheese. In any case, that is the Mechaber. Hagad Ramosav Yesh Machmir Afil B'Basar Achar Gvina. And there are those that are Machmir, and that's the story of the Maram, the Mordechai quotes. The Kain Neegin, but here's where the Ramah throws them. Kain Neegin, not after all Gvina. Shakol Shagvina Kosha Ein Eichle Machra Afil B'Saref. Kamei B'Gvina Achabasar. So just like you have to wait for Gvina Achabasar, you have to wait. So too, you have to wait for Basar Achar Gvina if it's Gvina kosher. V'keinu b'Zeir, because the Zeir doesn't differentiate whether it's first meat then dairy or first dairy then meat. The emes is the Zeir doesn't differentiate between Gvina kosher and other Gvina either. So the shaila is where the Ramah get this Gvina kosher. So that's where the Achreinim come in and say that it'd be medame to why it is that we wait longer. What are the reasons for this waiting period that we learned over there by Bosor, and extrapolate from there with the reason of its texture and the strongness of the taste. Okay, v'yesh makilin. So those that are lenient, they shouldn't be meich against them. If they don't wait, you have to do kinuach hadach until yadayim. But you should be machmir. So obviously, we need a summary of this din, and we also need a definition of what's the gevina kasha. So let's first go through over here one step at a time. Okay, we read this already. We differentiated and we explained why it is chai goes together with behemoth in this case. And here we see the shach says, "Feel belaylim yeshla ner yafa and it's arach netila." The Gemara said that during the daytime he didn't need to check his hands, but at nighttime you do need to check your hands. What if there's a light? If there's a good light, so the shach says it's also good enough. So that's the levush. Paskins like the levush. The proper thing is to wash your hands, even though it's during the day. Fine. So therefore, okay. Well, let's first learn inside, and then we'll bring it down lemaisa. What's which force? Okay. This we'll read this. I have a whole other slide on this, but just sort of we'll give the summary over here. Because Beis Yosef is supposed to be Mayim Rishenim. B'Shem Rishenim is supposed to be, the extra resh there. B'Shem Rishenim. Shedin netilas yadayim ben chalav labasar hu kedin mayim machrein l'chol davar. Has the same din of mayim machrein. In the Lashon HaShas, there's mayim rishenim, mayim emtsoyim, mayim machreinim. Mayim rishenim is when you wash your hands in order to make them heitzi. Mayim machreinim you do at the end of the meal before berachas hamazon, in order to take care of the melech sedemis. Mayim machreinim. And there are dinim of mayim machreinim, what you're allowed to use, what you're not allowed to use. What are the dinim of mayim machreinim? Then have mayim emtsoyim, which is this between gvin and bosor. You have mayim emtsoyim. So the dinim of mayim emtsoyim are like the din of mayim machreinim. We're going to give the details of those dinim soon. Chutz megimel devarim. There are three cases that they're different, and I'll skip it here because we're going to have it later on in the slide. Okay, let's get to the main din we're talking about. Like I said, there are those that say that the seder there of Shulchan Aruch is dafka, the first kinuch and then adacha, and the shach says it's lav dafka. You don't have to. Okay, there's the kinuch and adacha, and now let's get down to halacha lemaisa. So basically, from the Zayar, we see that there's no difference in gvina achabas and basar achigvina. That's the way it is al pi kabbalah. Then we have from the Maram a reason al pi nigla that you should even wait after eating gvina. And once you're waiting already, how long do you have to wait? So then we can compare that to the dinim of basar. So how does this all come out in the end? So according to Shulchan Aruch, if you're having first, in the pictures you see the top row is a piece of chicken, the bottom row is a piece of basar behema. So what's the din? So the Machaber Paskins like Agra, who says that it's Eifel Gevina Necholin Babakaden Yochel Lechel Miyad Bli Shum Pul. You don't have to do anything, no kinuach, no netilas yadayim, nothing. That's the Shulchan Aruch Paskins. But if it's Basar Behema, so then there's no waiting period after Gevina. That was what Rav Chifta said right at the beginning of today's share. Rav Chifta said you don't need to wait. You can do it right away. You have to make a bracha achreina, right? And you also need netila kinuach v'adacha. And that was the question they asked. How was it possible that he ate meat after Gvina and he didn't even do Natila? And the answer was, he said, it was during the daytime, I can inspect my hands. That was the Gemara. Now, what's Minach Chabad? Minach Chabad, we don't differentiate between chicken and meat. Hamtana Shah Ubirchas Avmos. So we wait an hour. Where does it come from to wait from an hour? So, but Pashtus, it's based on the Zayar, that you don't eat. According to the Zayar, it doesn't matter which one you eat first. And according to the Zayar, the problem is Shait Choda. Now, when it comes something which has another reason, you might need to make more than an hour. But as far as the chashash of Bosor B'chal B'chal together, if there's no extra texture or taste being a factor, let's say it's just milk, simplest example. So then you wait an hour, and that's good enough. Now, when it comes the waiting period after meat, so then we have the texture, it's hard, it gets stuck in your teeth, and then we have the taste, the tami nimshach, according to Rashi. So that's the way it was by first meat and then milk and then dairy. So this idea of Hamtana Shah is when we don't have that factor and we don't have Kivina Kasha. We're going to soon talk about Kivina Kasha. But let's first talk about Minach Chabad, this idea of Hamtana Shah. So I don't know if I mentioned before, but this we know that this Minach Chabad is, although it's a letter from the Rebbe, but the Rebbe wrote that he this idea of waiting an hour, he's not sure. The Rebbe wrote a letter to the Hamletzer, and it's an Igros Chelachov, and printed also in Shulchan Menachem. And he said he doesn't know whether it's Heirav L'Rabim or it's just for certain people. But in the end, when they gave him the same brochure, the brochures used to be passed through Tzach in New York. And the first time in Messiah, they made a Shuas brochure. They gave a recipe for cheesecake, Kemuven, when you're giving out a Messiah. And then they gave the Seder of Lichtzin and so on and so forth, and Kiddush and the Milchak meal, and said that you should wait a half hour. Because B'derech Klal, that's what's known, Minhag Ha'olam, is to wait a half hour. And that's what the Hamletzer wrote a letter to the Rebbe trying to explain where comes this Minhag of a half hour. And the Rebbe did not agree with his Makedas for a half hour. But in any case, the Rebbe wrote on the Mitzvayim brochure, Minhag Chabad Shah Achas. They wrote down you should have to wait a half hour between the Milchaks and the Fleishiks. Until that, it doesn't seem anybody, some people I guess knew, but it wasn't generally known that was Minhag Chabad. And it could be at that moment that Rebbe was kaveya that this should be Minhag Chabad, time Chabad behaves according to the Zayir, and said that's Minhag Chabad that we wait an hour and Birchas Hamazon. Now, if you remember, we said there's a machlek, Shach and Taz, whether you need Kinuach V'Adacha. If you don't wait at all, according in Sif Aleph, we saw that the Ramah required Kinuach V'Adacha. If you didn't wait at all, you're just relying on Tesis, making a bracha achrein, and then eating Gvina afterwards. And if you wait an hour, the Ramah didn't say it. And we had a machlek, Shach and Taz. The Taz says that the Ramah didn't say it, but he means it, and you still need Kinuach V'Adacha because you didn't wait 6 hours. After 6 hours, you don't need Kinuach V'Adacha. But after 1 hour, you need Kinuach V'Adacha. And the Shach says no. After 1 hour, you don't need Kinuach V'Adacha. That's what it said over there in Sef Aleph. So the Rebbe quotes that Shach and that Pri Megadim. Here's the letter from the Rebbe Shiur Tana Mechol B'Bosor. So I was asked in the chat, where do we get this from? You don't need Kinuach V'Adacha. It's this letter from the Rebbe. This is the first half of the Rebbe to the Hamlet. So L'Sheilos L'min Agena Megel Chiz Bosor Lachem Mechol Echol. B'chal Nagina Ba'anal Afil Lachre Chol V'Chema. Even if it's not cheese, it's just milk or butter. La'amtin Shah. Gam Lei Ba'Yisasuda. You can't eat the same meal either. You have to make a bracha achrei. Fine. So that's in general what people do. Can cause it b'shalom, Masechta Shvuos. Skip the parentheses. The Rebbe is not sure whether it's for everybody or not. The Rebbe, years later, passed in that is for everybody and said that's Minhag Chabad. And the Rebbe puts in the Rei Prima Godin L'Shulchan Aruch Yeridei Siv Peites Siv Seidas Siv Cotton Zion. And what does he say over there? The Hefsek Shah Machlif Kinuach. That if you wait an hour, that takes the place of the Kinuach. Kinuach and Adacha versteht sich go together. And what's interesting, when you look at this Pri Megadim, the Pri Megadim is Sif Sedas is on Shach, and the Shach is on Sif Aleph. The Shach is talking about, according to the Minhag of the Ramah, that you wait the Minhag that the Ramah says, Minhag Pasha, the people would wait an hour after meat before having dairy. Okay, and the Shach says you don't need Kinuach V'Adacha in such a case. Okay, and the Pri Megadim quotes it La'alacha. But over here also, he's talking about first meat and then dairy. But since first meat and then dairy is more machmer, so the Rebbe is taking out for sure it should be for dairy and then meat. So that's where it comes from. You can see why the Rebbe quotes the Pri Megadim rather than the Shach. Is an interesting question, but it's not for us to discuss now. So that's Lamaisa, why we have over here the Minhag Chabad. I'm telling you, that's from the letter from the Rebbe. That's where it comes from.
Why B'chal does the Rebbe bring out the people Godim?
Hang on a second. I'm just looking at the chat over here. Very interesting. 1944, the Rebbe told the Bachram learning in 770 that we wait an hour. Oh, very interesting. I guess the Bachram in 1944 were Yechid Segula. But where does this come from?
No, why does the Rebbe
this is in a Rishima, or you don't remember, do you? Rabbi Vogel. Heard from one of the Bachram. Very interesting. Okay, maybe later you'll tell me which one of the Bachram. Oh, you wrote privately. I thought this was a public thing. Okay, it's Rabbi Vogel wrote on the chat in 1944. The Rebbe told the Bachram learning at 770 that we wait an hour. Heard from one of the Bachram. Okay, later on the Rebbe put a Biksav, and we heard a Biksav from the instructions to Tzach. That's where I heard it from. I guess other people heard it from the Bachram. And you see, even this letter to the Hemlitzer, it wasn't clear to the Rebbe at that point whether it was for everybody or not. Yeah, question.
Why did the Rebbe call the Prima God in Bechlal?
I'm not sure I understand your question. The Rebbe's passing like the Rebbe's saying that we passing like the Prima Godim, not like the Taz.
Okay,
The Rebbe passing.
no, but if letters about the amount of time, why isn't the Gil about the Kinuach about Doctor?
What's happening is that after an hour, it's like you did a Kinuch V'Adacha. It could just be pushing the Rebbe's knowledge of biology, the way the mouth works and the way the digestive system works. After an hour, it's good enough. I don't know. To try to understand how and why the Rebbe did things is not a question. That's out of my pay scale. I'm sorry. Can't. I mean, we could try to figure it out, but it's all theory. Okay, so here on the bottom over here, page 39, your Kuntres over there, that brings from the Shach about that we wash our hands even during the day. And okay, let's get to the definition. I'm doing this in a different order on page 40 in the book. Let's get down to the very, very negative question of Gvina Kosher. Kosher Ramosh Gvina Kosher Yesh Lachm Lamtin Machra Rachilas Posik Mosh Mamtin Machre Bos Lachilas Gvina. Okay, so whatever it is, you wait. After the meat, that's what you have to wait after the Gvina Kosher. The Shaila is, what is Gvina Kosher? So you have on the right, I'm not sure exactly what that is, whether it's a wedge of cheese or it looks like a piece of cheesecake. Maybe before Shavuos, everything looks like cheesecake. But what you have on the left is something called Casa Marzu. Casa Marzu is this strange Italian cheese, which has worms. You know what? I think I'm going to skip this first. I'm going to go to the next. I'm going to come back to this slide, but let's first learn the Taz. Okay, so the many of the poskim speak about something in Eretz Yisrael called Gvinat Zehuva. Gvinat Zehuva is cheese which is semi-hard cheese. So the people in Eretz Yisrael, one of the people in Kashrus told me it's like Edam cheese, which is called a semi-hard cheese in the industry. And the question is, do you have to wait 6 hours after this cheese? So it's somewhat hard. I don't think maybe that's a picture of Gvina Zehuva, I'm not sure. In any case, it's definitely not 6 months old. But if you recall, I just want to review for us a moment and give another important detail or two regarding how you make cheese. If you remember the end of Sim Pezayin, I hope everybody's doing Chazara. You have to do Chazara every week. You should be doing the Chazara, otherwise you forget. At least every week. Should be Chazar over tomorrow, what we learned today, and keep Chazaring. And if you forgot it, then Chazar the next day until you don't forget it the next day. Because you keep doing the Chazara. In any case, the end of Sim Pezayin, we spoke about the Chol of Nimtza B'Keva and the whole issue of Davar HaMaimid, and you would take this milk or the fourth stomach of the cow, the Keva, and use it to make cheese. What happens when you use the Keva? So there's two ways to make cheese. You can make cheese, there's acid-based cheese and there's rennet-based cheese. Rennet is Keva, basically. So acid-based cheese is how you make things like cottage cheese and farmer cheese. And you could do this naturally. You just leave some milk out. I think I mentioned this when we learned some pezayin, that as the bacteria causes the milk to spoil, it produces lactic acid. The lactic acid changes the pH. And once the pH hits a certain point, I think it's 4.3, so then the curds and the whey separate out. The hard parts fall to the bottom. The greenish water goes to the top. And then you have curds. And then you put it in cheesecloth and you take out the rest of the liquid and you end up with farmer's cheese, basically. And you squash it together. You can make it a little hard, but real cheese, Swiss cheese, you're not going to make like that. For that, you need rennet. Rennet is that keva, and you put on the keva and it has this, the enzymes have this remarkable effect of causing it to separate into cheese. And there are all different ways to make it, and the different type of cultures and starters and different temperatures and how you stir it and how you cut it, all different ways to make different types of cheese. So today they've isolated the active enzymes, and they can basically do what used to take a long time, make basically the same type of cheese in a much shorter period of time. So the shaila is, are we interested in the end product and the taste, or are we interested in the texture? And it has to be hard too, because to make it hard, you need time, because you have to age it in order that the moisture evaporates. If you try to do this in an oven or under temperature or something, people have tried it, I'm sure, and pashtus, it ruins the cheese. It has to be a natural, slow evaporating process, and there's no substitute for time. Like, you can't cram if you're a farmer and you're gonna, Navi and Yale, so they planted and the wheat grew in 11 days, I think. But in any case, normally you can't do like that. Certain things just take time, but that
The enzymes that they isolated changes how long it takes.
yeah, sure. What used to take 6 months to make a cheese, you can make the same cheese now in 6 weeks.
But the moisture level is not
But
the
the
same.
moisture won't be identical. But this is the basis. You know what? Let's first learn it in the Taz, and this is the middle of the Taz over here on the base. That you have to wait. According to Rashi, you have to wait after meat because of the fat. Pshita yesh lesor gam begavina metulas. Metulas. Well, how did Teiloim fly in over here? We got worms in the cheese. You soon you have worms in the cheese. Basically, la lacha, they used to make wormy cheese. How, why, what, when is a fascinating discussion, but I'll just take 2 minutes on it, and I'm not going to talk about it, but let's focus on the point, unless you're so distracted with the vision of wormy cheese. But the idea is cheese made with worms and cheese made with rennet both have strong taste. That's how you make cheddar cheese or a Swiss cheese or anything like this. You're going to be we make it with rennet, we don't make it with worms. But the end effect is the same. Shatam shallah nimshach bepez man rav. That the taste remains for a long time. V'im ken yesh lachma. And therefore, says the Taz, you have to be machmer on such a cheese. You're soon going to say it's not only mitulas, it's also rennet, you'll soon see. It's because of the reason I just gave. It's because of the taste. It was just old cheese. You leave some farmer's cheese lying around, and it wasn't made with milk that was humda bakeva, that it was made with rennet, and that's what you used to coagulate the milk. You just took milk and you let it sit around and it dried out, which is the way you make basically acid-based cheese. All you need to do is just leave it. It'll spoil. The curds will fall to the bottom. You'll pour out the water and it'll dry up and you'll have cheese. You leave it long enough, it'll be hard cheese too. But that's not the kind of hard cheese we're talking about over here, because it doesn't have any rennet in it. It's not going to have a strong taste. So too, if you ate butter, it doesn't have a strong taste. You just have to do the pool as if it was milk. So you're still going to have to clean your mouth, clean your teeth, rinse your mouth, wash your hands. But taste is pretty sure. Somebody wants to be machma on that too, fine. But that's not the din. So he is machma the Taz based on the idea of the taste, that the end product, since it's made with rennet or it's metulas, since it has a strong taste, so therefore that's the equivalent that you have to wait after that sort of cheese, just like you're waiting after Bosor. So this is the source. There are many of the poskim. In general, the American poskim, you're talking about Igros Meshon, you're talking about the Bear Mesha. In general, not all of them, but many of the American poskim, B'chlal, paskin, that if it's not aged cheese, then they don't, they're not machmer. But this Gvina Tzuhuva, and much of our cheese is even stronger taste than the Gvina Tzuhuva. Many of that it's Yisrael de Kaposkim. The Shlomo Zalman said to be machmer. The Rabbi Yashiv says the minig is to be machmer. then the Rav Vosner and Bnei Brak said, maybe we could be makel, but it's so confusing. How are you supposed to know what's what? People are going to get all mixed up. So therefore, mitzad the people getting mixed up, you should be machmer. All different, in general, in Eretz Yisrael, the more machmer about all different types of cheese. And that's talking about, make it, push it down to earth. You have pizza, do you have to wait 6 hours? You don't have to wait 6 hours. Or you have cheesecake. So what kind of cheese are you having with your cheesecake? You're making blintzes. So you're making it with Swiss cheese or with mozzarella cheese, or you're making it with cottage cheese or farmer's cheese. What are you making with? Making it with cream cheese. So if it's farmer's cheese and cottage cheese and cream cheese and all of these things, so the emes is that somebody just asked me about feta cheese. Okay, so the different types of cheeses, it's would be the easiest thing according to the Dasa Machmir, Rabbi Handel Olav Shalom. So I learned kashrus and halacha by him, and I asked, and he was machmir on all these cheeses. He was machmir, not the cottage cheese, the farmer's cheese, and cream cheese, but all of the cheddar and the mozzarella and all of these Swiss. It was machmir. I said it's not 6 month cheese. So he says they do the same thing in less than 6 months. I said it's just as hard. It's just as and just a strong taste. He says, but check it out. Next time you're in a cheese factory, check it out. So I was in a cheese factory. Next time I was in a cheese factory, so I went to the guy in quality control, QC. He's the guy that knows everything going on in the factory. And I asked him, do you have a way of checking how hard the cheese is? And the guy looks at me like I landed from the moon. Like, what do you think my job is? I'm in quality control. Like, that's my job, is to see how hard the cheese is. So, okay, stupid question number one. Down the chain. I said, how do you do it? So he showed me. So they had a standardized machine over there with a spring on the bottom, but it was like a wire used, like you have a cheese cutter, yeah, with a wire. That's what they do. But it's standardized to use everybody uses the same size block of cheese with the exact same wire and the exact same machine cut. That's the way they did it years ago. I'm talking about a mice many, many years ago. That's the way they did it back then. There's still some people do it like that today, but and as you slice it, so it pushes down the spring and it measures how hard it is. And in order for the cheese to be a consistent quality, they have to measure to make sure the cheese is coming out okay. So I said, is there a way of telling? Is there a difference between aged cheddar and the way you're making the cheddar? The guy, again, he looks at me like, I obviously don't know what's going on, which I didn't. And he pointed to a whole library of books over there on the shelf with all the standards that there are on the industry. So I said, can you show me cheddar? So he says, yeah, here's a 6 week cheddar and here's a 6 month cheddar, whatever it was. And it was almost identical, slight difference. And I asked about the taste too. They have other ways of checking the taste. Now it's become much more sophisticated and they do it all by computer. You have all different sorts of measurements for quality control, all being run measured by computers and automatic machines, which are cutting things and extruding things and smashing it in different directions and measuring different ways of measuring the taste as well. And the kitzur from the riches, from the knowledge I have received, is that there's a slight difference. So if just to pick a number out of the blue, that if like a 6 months hard aged cheddar would be 100 on a scale of 1 to 100, 0 to 100, so then the 6 week would be 98. So I went back to Rabbi Handel. You see, it's the same thing. I mean, they didn't have measurements. There's a difference between 98 and 100. They didn't have, they tasted it, and they tasted it was hard. So it all comes down to the same thing. So Rabbi Handel Olav Shalom was machmer on all of these cheeses. And basically it was because they're made with rennet. Now, just because it says rennet on the label doesn't mean that it's that sort of cheese, because they make sometimes even cottage cheese, sometimes they'll throw in a little tiny bit of rennet, but it's still an acid-based cheese. They use a little bit of rennet to keep things going, but go back to Zevaz Agadim, we learned at the end of Sim Pezayin, that would not be enough to make it into this sort of cheese. It's basically an acid-based cheese, and it's not giving a kosher. So I went to Rabbi Marlo Olav Shalom. I was speaking to him once, and he says, "What you learn by Rabbi Handel?" He says, "What's the story with the 6 hours for the cheese? I don't understand it." So I told him what I found out. So he says, Adarabba. He says, this whole thing of waiting 6 hours for giving a kosher is a chiddush. So if there's a little bit of a difference between the real 6 month cheese and the one which is made to look like it, so there's a little bit of difference. We can be machalik. You don't need to be machalik. Okay, So there's a difference of opinion on that. So you don't have to be meich against people that do, but the people that are machmer on these cheeses, tam godel according to the Taz, to be machmer. Okay, so just one other issue I'll raise on this is a whole discussion about what happens after you package the cheese. So after you package the cheese, so you put it in a sealed plastic, and then it sits on a shelf. So let's say it was made in New Zealand, and you packaged it at 5 months, and by the time it got to the States, it's already 6 months, or it's sitting on the shelf for a while. Now it's 6 months. Does the clock continue to run when it's there in the package? So there are those that say that it's such an amaratzis. How can you say the clock continues to run? It's a sealed package. It doesn't continue to age after that. And there are others that say they don't know what they're talking about. Of course, it continues to age after it's in the package. Okay, shame. Does it or does it not? So I would imagine that the humidity does not change too much because it's sealed. So it doesn't become too much drier and it doesn't lose. That's one of the ways to measure the hardness. The easiest way is to measure the moisture content, because as it evaporates, it becomes hard. So if it's sealed and there's no place for the moisture to evaporate to, you don't see the whole inside of the plastic is full of water. So with pashtus, it's not drying out too much. However, the chemical reaction, whether that continues afterwards or not, it's certainly possible it does. Whether it does or not, I don't know. I'm not a cheesemaker. But that's the basic story with the hard cheese. There's a famous Yad Yehuda. Yad Yehuda is one of the Achreinim and Yeredeya, who writes Varichas Gedela, and Yad Yehuda speaks about once you melt the cheese, that even if it would be given a kasha, so once you melt it, it's not given a kasha anymore. It's not melted. Yeah, it was liquefied or not much liquid, but it's not given a kasha anymore. So then you don't need to wait 6 hours. So in general, this psak, the Yad Yehuda, is not widely accepted by the poskim, because they said, okay, you're gonna kasha, but what about the tam? It doesn't change if it's melted. I didn't see in poskim, but those say heat something up, reich and neidif, that it brings out the taste even stronger once you heat it up. I didn't see that anywhere, but just the same as the svara. Anyway, but generally it's not accepted. And even those that pass like Yad Yehuda is not talking about something like pizza where the cheese is melted on the top. It's talking about that you melted the cheese into the meichel, like you have macaroni and cheese, and the whole thing's mixed up throughout the whole meichel. That's not what he's talking about. When sitting be'en on the top, he was not talking about such a case, but that is something which is widely quoted. So any questions on Gavina Kosher?
Everybody writes about Swiss cheese at 6 months, but Swiss cheese is only 12 weeks to make.
Anyway, there's all different ways of making it. And even when you're talking about Swiss cheese, so I saw in one of the poskim, I think Rav Sternbach maybe, so he was writing about the Swiss cheese. I haven't seen it for years, but years ago, they used to have these circles, and you had the wedges, these like triangular wedges that were wrapped up in foil, and it was from Switzerland. And it was come out like cream cheese. It was soft. They also called it Swiss cheese. So what they mean by Swiss cheese, but again, there is there's such a thing as aged cheese, okay? And you could make a they can make cottage cheese also. They can make it in a shorter period of time or a longer period of time. And people, if you can make it faster, and you make more money, so that's a very big motivation. There are different ways of making it. You can have Swiss cheese in 12 weeks. Whether they can make it in 12 hours yet or not, I'm not sure. But you can make it in a longer period of time or not. So again, so the question, okay, this was a private question. You can send it to the group also. Cheddar cheese, how do we know if it's a 6-hour cheese? So it's a machlekes aposkim. Asay locharav istalt min asofik. So people know why Rabbi always wait 6 hours. And I've handled paskin that all of these cheeses that are some hard cheeses, cheddar and Swiss and mozzarella and Munster and all of these cheeses that are made, they're not acid-based cheeses, they're rennet-based cheeses. They're made with microbial rennet, they're not made with the animal cava, but whatever the case is, the result is basically the same when you have to wait 6 hours, and other poskim say not. Most of the Lubavitcher Rabbanim say you don't have to, at least the ones I've spoken to. But not only learn about Rav Handel, but I look at the cheese and I see that it's, if you pardon the expression, dvarim shel tam. Okay, Kosev Rama. So here we have over here, Aleza Gvina Gmedubar. Okay, so the Shach says that if it's Gvina Yeshana, that it's already 6 months old, so then you have to wait. He doesn't say that's the only case, which is what I find curious about all those that say that the only factor is to wait 6 months. Because the reason it's like that, the only thing it says really, really crystal clear is this. But this is sort of step number 2. Step number 1, at least according to the Taz, and it's mashma from the Shach also. The Shach is erring on a chumrah. People think that the main thing is the 6 months, but it's not evident, and you can see that from the Taz. And from the Taz says Gvina Matulas or Gvina Shum de Bakeva. So it says Gvina Matulas. So that's what's famous over there. Catches very dramatic. Catches everybody. Telling you what's with the wormy cheese. We'll get there in a second. Or Gvina Shum de Bakeva. This is a Ma'aseh B'chol Yom. Gvina Shum de Bakeva. Okay, it's not animal keva, but it's something which is biologically the same thing. They're genetically reproducing it. There's all different ways of making. Bal nefesh yachmer. Yachmer even on 6-month cheese, says the Taz. Okay, so here's a picture of this casamarzu, which is this Italian cheese, and these are worms. So if you look, I don't have enough time to go into it. Very interesting discussion, but you look in Hilchos Teilayim, the last sif in Hilchos Teilayim is talking about worms that you find within the flesh of fish, which is very common, by the way. If and the Shulchan Aruch says it's mutter, and if it wouldn't be mutter, that would be the end of gefilte fish probably for almost everybody, because white fish very frequently has worms in the flesh. And the Gemara says in Shulchan Aruch Paskins that the worms that come within the flesh of the fish are mutter because they were not parish, they did not separate out from the flesh of the fish. If they were swimming around the ocean and then they bored into the through the skin into the flesh of the fish, so then there would be a problem because they were already also when they were swimming around the water. But since they came in, first explanation, they came in when they were not visible, they were microscopic, and so they got into the flesh and then they grow inside. So too, these worms are coming from flies, which lay eggs, which are microscopic, and then they turn into maggots, and then they grow up and they become flies. In the meantime, these maggots that turn from a little egg into this visible, clearly visible maggot, it's got to eat something. So it eats cheese, and the cheese goes in one side of the worm, and it goes out the other side of the worm. And this makes a whole different type of cheese, which is, if you're into this sort of thing, mamish, unbelievable, tasty. To us, it's ekeldik, but you look at the Ramah didn't seem to be too bothered by it. The Ramah says, the problem if it's parish, so the things, and they jump all over the table, they become maser. But as long as it's still on the surface of the cheese, the Ramah, Sim Pedal, Lashon, I feel I think, even if they jump around, they jump around from one place to another, they're hopping around. You see videos of these things. You can look at it today, you can see everything in the Finsternet, you can see everything. So you can see them jumping around, but it's Lashon Ramah, that they're jumping around from place to place. They're still not called parish. They don't jump very high, and they're still considered to be there with the cheese. And even if they're jumping around, they're still mutter. It's still mutter. The Pri Chodesh is not happy about this. The Pri Chodesh says this is the Raisa, but Lamaisa, this is what it's talking about if you're wondering what Metalas is, but the European Union doesn't even allow it, so it's all produced on the ground, but that's the story with the Metulas. But the same thing applies to the very, very common everyday case of rennet-based cheese. So you have the das of the Ramah is talking about waiting 1 hour. The Ramah says, the Ramah holds Bikr Adin, the minig is that you wait 1 hour after meat. When he says when you have to wait after Gevina kosher, just like meat, so he means an hour. Okay, but it's the Taz brings down that he's talking over here about waiting for 6 hours. So that's way certainly the American poskim hold like that, and it seems from what I hear in Eretz Yisrael, although when I looked at the list of poskim, it seems that the majority of Gedolei poskim were machmer, even on the Gevina Tzuhuva. But from talking to people in Eretz Yisrael, it seems that most of the people will only wait if it's 6 months cheese. The kashrus organizations in general certainly rule like that. Okay, Questions? No questions. Let's go on. I said we were going to get to the case of Maimem Tzoyim. So that's here over the that we quoted briefly over there on the right-hand column of the last slide. So here we have the whole thing spread out. Mari v'seinayim til shadayim shebein chalav labasar shavin l'dinim ma'machrein. So that's what the Shach quoted b'shem rishenim, that all the dinim, all quote unquote, all the dinim, the 6 dinim that we have by ma'machreinim, and the same din applies to Maimem Tzoyim. In general, they're kulas. Late tzarech keli. Again, we have 3 different types. We have the natila before, natila for a meitzi. That's Maim Rishenim. Then Maimem Tzoyim between the milchiks and the fleishiks, and then Maim Achreinim before Birchas Amos. So the number 2 and number 3, Maimem Tzoyim are just like Maim Achreinim. Late tzarech keli. That's the first one, the yellow on the right. You don't need a keli. For Maim Rishenim, you need a keli. Rak chelik metzbois. You only have to do the first 2 joints of the fingers. Those are the parts that are more likely to come in contact either with the milchiks or the melchs demis in the case of Maim Achreinim. And for Til Shadayim L'Suda, you have to wash the perek, which l'chatchil is up to the wrist, but even the more lenient day says it's not enough 2 joints. You have to do 3 joints. Daim benatila pamachas. You don't have to wash 2 or 3 times. You only do once. Chatzitza maim makeves. We're not so worried about chatzitza. Tzarech maim loy reischim. The truth is that's the same for maim rishenim. Also, you can't use boiling hot water, and that's boys neitis lamata. You should have your fingers pointing down. For maim rishenim, you have your fingers pointing up. Okay, so it's all the same maim rishenim, maim achronim, but there are 3 exceptions. 3 exceptions. Chutz mishleisha devarim on the bottom right. We'll take the blue one first. Dafka mayim v'lo shamashkim. So you have to use water for Maimem Tzoyim. You can't use shar mashkim. There's all discussion with the Marshal. The Marshal doesn't see why you should have this extra chumrah. But in any case, Lamaisa, Shach brings this down. So for Maim Achreinim, you can use other types of liquids. For Maimem Tzoyim, you need water. In the middle, tzorech niguf. That after Maim Achreinim, you don't need to dry your hands, halachically. But for Maimem Tzoyim, we're worried that maybe some of the water still has some traces of the dairy on it, so therefore you have to dry your hands. And also, Hesach Hadas, when you wash Maim Rishenim, so you have to guard your hands until you make a meitzi, and even after you make the meitzi. After you washed off the Melch Sedemis with the Maim Achreinim, so we're not worried about Hesach Hadas. Okay, but Maimem Tzoyim, you are worried about Hesach Hadas. Yadayim Nekiyas Bli Hesach Hadas. You have to make sure that they get clean because you're still maybe old. You're going to touch the milchiks again, so you have to keep in mind that you don't touch anything else. So, and here this is a chazara. When do you need to wash? So b'yem yochel la'ayim v'leitzarech natila. So during the day, this is from the Gemara that you can check your hands visually, and it's enough. And b'lay leitzarech natila. At night you do. B'yem yesh le'teura tevid leitzarech natila. If it's well lit, even at night you don't need to. But lamaisa b'chol leif and tzarech natila. That's the Shach paskins that you have to wash it anyway, and we're concerned that they became somewhat dirty. That's the chumrah of the Shach. Okay, we have less than 10 minutes left for Sif Gimel. So before we read, give the overview of Sif Gimel. Sif Gimel is talking about Tafshir Shel Bosor and Tafshir Shel Gvina. Now there is a lot to talk about, maybe some practical cases I'll bring in next time. But we have many kulas. When you look in the Gemara, you look in the Rishonim, and even you look in Shulchan Aruch, we're not so machmir about the waiting time between a Tafshir Shel Bosor and Tafshil Shel Gvina as opposed to Bosor and Gvina itself. Lamaisa, however, we treat them basically the same. So if you have a Tafshil Shel Bosor, you got to wait 6 hours anyway. So to go into the Arichas, it's very interesting that like every other din in Shulchan Aruch and every din in discussion in the Gemara and Machlekes Rishonim and so on and so forth are very interesting. But Lamaisa, that part of it is not so applicable. But there are many dinim that are discussed over here which are very, very negei Lamaisa. So Sif Gimel Achel Tafshil Shel Bosor. Let's first define what's a tafshil shel basar. The tafshil shel basar, let's take a case of an egg. You have an egg in the cholent. You have a svardim over here, they put eggs in the cholent. So the eggs are in the cholent, so there's no meat that gets inside the egg. You put it inside with the shell. So the taste goes through, but the actual basar doesn't go through. So if you eat such an egg, that would be the case it absorbed tam. So it's like a tafshil shel basar. Or you cooked a potato in some milk, and you took out the potato, so the potato absorbed the milk. But even if you wash off the potato, it has tam within it. So that's like a tafshil shel gvina. So Shulchan Aruch paskins, you don't need to wait between that egg and that potato. You don't need to wait. Natila b'neim el reshus. So paskins over here like the mekel, the gedei, and the reshem. V'yesh matzrichim natila. Those who say you need natila, even from a tafshil of this one to the tafshil of the other one. But let's say after the egg, you're not eating now a milk and a potato. You're eating some cheese, or the opposite way around. Or basar atzmach tafshil shel gvina. After the milk and the potato, you want to eat some meat. So the machaber paskins, then you need to wash your hands. You still don't need to wait 6 hours according to the machaber. Okay, but lemaisa, after everything comes out, after all the achrein and lepel, we're going to wait 6 hours in both of these cases. All of these cases, you end up waiting. But there are many negayed dekadim. So let's first learn the Ramah of Shuman shel basar din kebasar atzma. We mentioned this before. Shuman shel basar is not considered to be a tafshil shel basar; it's considered to be basar. For that reason, very common case, you're getting French fries in a fleishika restaurant. What's the status of the French fries? So if it's a fleishika fryer, let's say they're frying chicken in the fryer, is that called a tafshil shel basar because it was cooked in the oil? The emes says that oil is full of chicken fat. It's not just a tafshil shel basar, then a basar atzmi. I mean, it's all discussion nachreinim. That those that say like this, those that say like that. But lamaisa, if you ever look at a deep fryer, there's a davar aposhet. This is the shuman shel basar. It's not just the oil that absorbed tam. So the Ramah, again, the Mechaber was machmer. Excuse me, the Mechaber was lenient, was mekel, but tafshil shel basar, tafshil shel gvina. Okay, he was also mekel, said you only need netila if it's one step more machmer, but still you don't need to wait. But tafshil shel basar with gvina, or tafshil shel gvina with basar. One comes to the Ramah that stricter case with the tafshil shel basar and then gvina, that you have to treat it like you just finished the tafshil shel basar. You got to wait 6 hours to eat gvina. That's the Ramah. What I mentioned to you from the achreinim is even tafshil shel basar and tafshil shel gvina. Miumein basar b'tafshil rakshin is special b'kedera shel basar. Let's say it was cooked in a fleishika keli. Very common case. You have food, parva food that was cooked in a fleishika keli. So Ramah says mutar lechal achar of gvina. You're allowed to eat gvina afterwards. You don't have to wait. If you cook some pasta in a fleishika pat, you're allowed to eat cheese afterwards. You can't put cheese on that pasta, but you can eat the cheese afterwards. And there's no minhag to be machmer. And there's the achreinim say, what kind of din is this? What's the havamina? You have to wait because of basar ben ishnayim, time of nimshach. I mean, you feel full, you feel fleshik after eating pasta cooked in the fleshik pot. No such. We don't do. Even in the old days, they were able to taste it was fleshik. We can't taste that either. But in any case, but time nobody says such a thing. So they want to say, as we see in the slide, that they want to say that they want to learn. The shach brings down that it's not a clean pot. It was a fleshik pot that wasn't washed. So there's still some amoshes of basar inside. And that's the chiddush of the Ramah. That's why the Ramah says you still don't need to wait 6 hours. Now, how much is a little bit? It wasn't cleaned. How dirty was the pot? Ad masai. So was it batal b'shishim, the leftover? Was it not batal b'shishim? That's a machlekes achrei. Soon see. And the chumrah of the Ramah, he said, after you had a tafshil shel basar, you shouldn't have gvina. Okay, but the other way around, it's much more lenient. After you had tafshil shel gvina, then you're allowed to have basar according to Ramah. He doesn't have the chumrah like that. As I mentioned, the achreinim yamach. Yesh little yoda b'neim, but you still need to feel yochel basar mamish like tafshil shel basar, tafshil shel gvina. And even if the tafshil shel basar and tafshil shel gvina, which in this case the Ramah agrees with the mechaber to be mekel, Im noga behem beyodov, I still need natila. And the last din in Ramah, very applicable din. Shamish hamashamish besuda. You have a waiter. Does the waiter need to wash his hands? Okay, so normally, if it's a restaurant or it's a chasana, whatever the case is, the waiter serving the food, so everything's fleshik. So what's the shaila? The whole thing. But in a house, it's not like that. You have the akeres abayis, so she's making lunch for somebody to bring to work, or she's cooking out of Shabbos, as mentioned earlier in the shir. She's cooking out of Shabbos. She's cooking, giving one a milchik breakfast, and she's getting Yom Tov up on the stove, and she's working with milchiks and working with fleishiks. You have to worry about the hands. The Ramah says, "Shamish hamashamish besuda v'negei ba'echlin ein etzarich natila." He says. Ramah says he doesn't need to wash his hands. The only case we see the Gemara says you have to wash your hands, the people that are eating. But we see that the shach, others come out and say, wait a second. If you're worried that the hands are going to be dirty, what's the difference? So here we have the end of that Ramah about the tafshir shel Bosor. So we're going to just take these last few dinim and bring down halacha lemaisa. So if you have ein Bosor b'tafshir, Bakshan is bashal, but Geder shel Bosor moto lachol achar gvina. He said, "Ein ba minig lahachma." So fleshika pat, pasta was cooked in a fleshika pot. There's no minig to be machma. So the Shach says, not talking about a clean pot. Otherwise, what's a chiddush of the Ramah? A chiddush b'divrei Ramah shafilum yesh shayris reitiv besari besir. There's some leftover gravy. There's a little schmutz in the bottom of the pot, but it's bashal shom parve, and then you cook the parve. Ein tzarach lahamtim nachav. Then you don't need to wait. So the shaila is, what if it's not batal b'shishim? If it's batal b'shishim, that's one thing. It's batal b'shishim. Batal b'shishim, it's parv. So what's the difference? It's still parv. It's batal b'shishim. There's a little bit left over there. Shayla lechatchila b'diavad mavatal is lechatchila lepail. It's a parv thing. It's batal b'shishim. What if it's not batal b'shishim? Is the Ramah allowing that too? So that's a machlek. In betavshel parv ain't shishim keneged hashayis Bosor. Let's say there's no batal b'shishim. The leftover fleshiks on the bottom of the pot was not batal b'shishim. Im tzorach lahamtim nachrav sheishos. You have to wait 6 hours. The Eliyah Rab and the Prim Begadim say yes. That this kula of the Ramah is only if it's batal b'shishim. The Prichodesh and Pischei Tshuva say late tzorach lahamtim. No, chiddush of the Ramah that even if it's not batal b'shishim, you only have to wait 6 hours if it's mamashim fleshiks. But if it's only fleshiks mixed in, anyway, a big machlekes, and it's definitely kedai to lahachmer over here. But there is such a machlekes. So it looks like there's a lot of leftovers in this pot over here. So I don't know whether that's shishim or not shishim, and that whether what are you doing in case of Suffolk, you're gonna have to wait for Hilchos Taruvos. So here he brings the psak la'loch yesh la'akol raka shalei morgesh tam bosor b'tafshel. As long as there's no tam, then you could be mekel. But if you do have tam, then you should be machmer. And I think I'm gonna skip this. This is talking about using a dover charif. There was another din, very practical din I wanted to mention. I know it's past 9:30, but just very practical din. He mentions over here, very common case. Let's say you have parva meichel, a bowl of rice, and you want to serve it with a milchik meal, and somebody sticks a fleshig spoon to take it out. Uh-oh, was the spoon clean? No. So what now? Somebody put a spoon, a fleshig spoon inside. So is that remaining parv? Can you eat it with milk? And if not, you have to wait 6 hours after eating the rice. So you have to know what's batal b'shishim or not. So lechatchila, we say you can't eat it with milk either once a person put in the fleshka spoon. So derech mevatel is lechatchila if you're doing it like that. There are those that are matir saying it's already batal. If it's already batal, it's already batal. But if it's a lechatchila, it's problematic. But to wait 6 hours, we paskins over here not to wait 6 hours. Another din that he has over here. I thought I had a slide for this. Hang on a second. Oh, yeah, I do. Do I? Yeah, okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna share my screen again one more time. What about Zeya? That you have steam coming out of food. So let's say you have sometimes airline meals. This is like a chazara, but let's look at this, the second case from the left. That you have a part of food that absorbed steam from the meat. So you have like an airline meal, it has these little compartments over here. So here you got rice, here you got string beans, and here you have flesh. Okay, so if a person eats the flesh, they got to wait 6 hours. What about if you ate the rice? The whole thing was heated together, so the steam circulates over here. So what's the story with the rice? Can you eat the rice together with milk? And do you have to wait? So he brings down from the Butchacher, the Eshel Avram, the two Eshel Avrams. There's Eshel Avram, is the Prima Godim on the Magen Avram and Or Chaim, and then you have Eshel Avram, the Butchacher, printed in the back of most of editions of Shulchan Aruch. So you paskins, you don't have to wait 6 hours, but you're not allowed to eat it with cholov. I mean, there's a question people frequently ask: that you're makbid on the shechita, so you're not going to eat the meat. But what happens with the rest of the part of food that's in the airline meal? So in general, the steam goes from one to another, and that's why you can't eat it together with milk. Whether you have to be machmir on that with the shechita, with the edim is a different story. Pavish is bashal basir basaris. We say lo tzarech lahamtim lachatchila ein lachlim cholov. So lachatchila you shouldn't have it together with milchiks. But the it's mutter. And the last din we learned over there with the shamish, so he quotes over here the shach saying that you should be machmer even with the shamish. The Ramah says he doesn't need to wash his hands, but the shach says to be machmer, and therefore if you have example they brought over here is that you have somebody in the middle of a fleishik meal and they have to make a milchik bottle for the baby, so then they have to wash their hands first. Just like the shamish, mashamish basuda. And here's the summary we had before. Bosor, reitiv shel bosor, you have to wait 6 hours. Parvish is bashlim bosor, but you also say you have to wait 6 hours, even though tavshel, that's parvish is bashlim bosor. Here are the examples over here. These are all parva foods, but they were cooked together. You took the potatoes out of the cholent. It's a tavshel shel bosor. So even though it's a parva food, but it absorbed the taste, the egg, and everything else in this picture, that's called tavshel shel bosor. So although when you learn Mechaber Ramah, it's not like that, but the Maisa, it's Tzarech Lam T'nei Shoyis.
The pashas, when we say late tzarech laham, means even in the same suda you could eat it.
Late Tzarech Lahamtin. I guess not the same mouthful. Not the same mouthful. Yeah. We'll see later on that when you have something cooked in a keli, if it's in a benyame, sometimes you can have it, a parva which is cooked in the fleshik keli. Rabbi Bakarski used to say kemen bemen. We'll learn kemen bemen later on. Kemen akeli, bemen akeli. Okay, everything at its proper time. Okay, gentlemen, please chazara. Okay. Kotanach, Kabbalah Satera, Simcha B'Pnimius, and Lamaisa. What do you do after the cheesecake? Halakha Lamaisa. No, you had cheesecake. It was made with cream cheese. It's not Kamina Kasha. But what do?
Wait an hour.
Wait an hour. What else?
Make
Bench.
bracha
Bracha Achreina. What else?
Wash in the hand.
Oh, we didn't discuss that. So the shaila is, we say we brought from the Rebbe, there was a machleka shachantaz. Yeah, you need kinuach vadacha after an hour? The Rebbe pasked over there brought from the Prima Godim that we don't need kinuach vadacha. The shaila, what happens to your hands after an hour? The schmutz goes off your hands an hour. So it doesn't say you're dying maskon. You're saying the same thing applies to the mouth, applies to the hands as well. And befrat, what's after 6 hours? I mean, if you got cheese under your fingernails, I mean, it goes away after 6 hours. You have bosor ben shnayim, you have bosor tachas atziponayim. There's such a gather. What happens of? But halachically speaking, there's all discussion on it. There's no clear hachra. But mistama, you're going to wash for a suda anyway, so you'll end up washing your hands. That suda is supposed to be a meitzi, so. You're going to end up washing your hands anyway, so it's not a problem. Okay, Kabbalah Sateirim Simcha B'Pnimis. And you have to wait the hour from when?
When you finished eating.
When you finish eating what?
Vina.
Oh, finish the cheesecake. Fine. Okay.